Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. While the Warrior of Light and the Scions saved Novrant from the light and prevented the 8th Umbral calamity, that doesn't mean things are over. The Scions are still stuck on the first, and there is the question that needs to be answered. With the timeline leading to the Exarch's future prevented, why hasn't he disappeared? The only explanation is the world that he came from is now a part of its own timeline, an alternate reality, which means the Exarch won't fade away at all. Which is good because you all need him to help work on sending the Scions back home. Since they can't go back home, they all head out to catch up with friends they've made on the first, while the Exarch sends you home to report to Tataru and to find out what's been happening there while you were away. A lot's happened. Gaius and Estinian are at the Imperial Palace in Garlemald, and they arrive in time to see Zenos murder his father for the simple crime of putting his fight with you at risk by trying to use Black Rose. The man's gotten his body back since Elidibus ran instead of fighting him, but Gaius, seeing the Emperor get murdered, attacks Zenos anyway. In the meantime, Elidibus, sensing that Image Selk is now dead, leaving him as the only unsundered, he starts to work on a new plan. Seeing how powerful fractured beings like you and Zenos have become makes him wonder about what's going to happen next, especially since Zenos knows the truth about the planet and its shards. Hydaelyn may be winning the war for now, but he plans on having you all killed on the first. Since you're running around claiming to be warriors of darkness, he'll crush you with warriors of light. On the first, Reen senses something out in the empty, and because he's not going to let her go alone, Thancred goes with her to check it out, which leads into the story of Eden, which I've covered on this channel in its entirety, so check that out if you're interested. Back on the source, Tataru is happy to see you back safe and sound. She enlisted the help of a friend of yours who we all know as Estinian, and she tried to call him, but he hasn't answered the link pearl. The Eorzean Alliance says that the fighting at Gimlet Dark has stopped, and the Empire isn't making any moves to attack again, yet. Which means there'll be some time for a little rest, and time for you to tell Tataru and Flamen everything that happened on the first. Hearing that Minfilia is truly gone is hard for both women, but Flamen is proud of her daughter, and from what she's heard of Reen, the girl will make a good heir. And she wants you to tell her that when you get back to the first. While the three of you talk, Rio shows up to say that he's decided to sneak over the border to see if getting closer to Garlemald will help him get a signal from Estinian. With the fighting being over in Gimlet, it shouldn't be too hard for him to sneak into the nation. He wanted to let Tataru know that, and that Kral has made it back to the Rising Stones. Kral's been monitoring the health of the unconscious Scions, and there's a problem. Their ether is becoming unstable, and since Thancred's is the worst while the twins are still pretty much okay, the instability is obviously being caused by being on the first for too long. Kral thinks it's a sign of the link between their body and soul fading, so if you don't get them back in their body soon, the Scions will die. Kral doesn't know how long you have, but she and Matoya will keep them alive until you bring them back. Fixing the Scions is easier said than done. The best minds on the source are already working on the problem and haven't gotten anywhere. Kral, however, thinks the cure lies with the Exarch, so she sends you back to the first to let everyone know what's going on and to see if the Exarch has made any progress on the whole saving the Scions thing. Which he hasn't, which is no real surprise. The others, minus Thancred and Reen, show up to hear the news that you brought, and they're not really surprised that their bodies are dying, although their souls seem fine for now. In any case, they really need to figure out a way to get home. When you're trying to solve a problem, the best thing to do is start at the beginning, so the Exarch explains how he brought you to the source in the first place. For starters, it's not his power that he's been using for all of his great feats. He uses large amounts of energy that are stored in the Crystal Tower to power all of his magic. The same goes for the magic he used to summon you. He used the tower to cut a hole in reality that only allows one specific person to travel through. He had made the hole attuned to the Warrior of Light, but he accidentally grabbed the Scions and forced them through it, which is why their souls were torn from their bodies. If you try to squeeze a square peg through a round hole, pieces of the peg will be torn off to make it fit. In this case, the Scions were the peg, and their bodies were the bits torn off to make them fit. He plans on doing everything he can to get you all home, but the one method he thinks will undo the summoning is his death. With the fact that he didn't disappear when the calamity was prevented, I don't see how he can think him dying will send you all back, but time travel is almost always dumb. And Eorzea shows how dumb she thinks it is by casually walking up and flicking the Exarch across the forehead, claiming that he owes you his life, and that means he can't die without your permission. That's not exactly how that works, but Eorzea and the Exarch both practically worship you, so if you told them to do something stupid, they probably would. Y'shtola thinks that their time would be better spent studying you since you're the summoning that worked perfectly, and you're free to travel between both worlds. And not only did your soul stay intact, you didn't lose your clothes or the stuff that's in your seemingly bottomless pockets. It's a lot like regular teleportation magic. It treats the stuff that you're carrying like it's a part of your body. So if you could put them all in your pocket, technically you should be able to take them to the source. Of course, if that didn't work, they'd be left floating in the rift forever. Now, if they could store their souls in something you have, like some white auracite, you should be able to take them. And if the auracite can hold the souls of something as powerful as an Ascian, holding them should be simple. That of course means you have to figure out a way to keep their souls safe inside of the auracite, then take them back out once they're on the source. The Exarch actually knows someone who's pretty good at soul manipulation. A Nu Mou friend of his lives in a palace that was abandoned after the flood by the elves who built it. This Nu Mou used to be in an honored position in Vobert's royal court, and was said to be the most knowledgeable person in the world when it came to matters of the soul. The fact that this Nu Mou separated itself from the world means it may not want to help you, and considering the fact that the Exarch tried to get its help with the Sin Eaters a few years ago, only to get attacked by its familiars, means this is going to go about as poorly as everything else you tried. But most of the Fae do seem to like you, so this may work in your favor. Or this Nu Mou might try to kill you. Either way, it's worth a try. Urianger decides not to join you on this little mission, and instead goes off to craft some white auracite, so the rest of you head off to the Grand Cosmos. The Exarch expects you all to be attacked the minute you set foot in the place, so instead of trying to sneak in, you all just march in with weapons in hand. Eorzea thinks that's a terrible way to ask someone for help, but Y'shtola thinks the Nu Mou would be interested in meeting people who could beat its defenses. At least she would if it were her. Plus the Exarch is eager to fight by your side again anyway. And you indeed have to do a lot of fighting inside of the palace because the Nu Mou has a lot of creatures for you to face. Beating its strongest one does make it reveal itself to you, and it decides to talk. The Exarch explains to Paglth'an that you all need its help, while throwing in the words that are difficult for Nu Mou to resist, like shake and beg. Paglth'an really doesn't want anything to do with humans after his last bad experience with the Vobert mage, who turned his only friend into a monster. That's a story that I covered in Tales from the Shadows number 5, and after what happened, I don't blame Paglth'an for separating from mortals. But after you swear that you're only looking for a way to save your friends, Paglth'an agrees to come to the Crystarium as long as you pay. Once the Exarch tells Paglth'an everything, the Nu Mou is amazed to find out that the reason the night sky is back is because of you, a person from an entirely different world. That's not nearly as shocking as the knowledge of other worlds in general, but the fact that the souls of the Scions are far denser than other souls and they have no bodies is enough proof to show that the story is not a lie. Paglth'an can see that you do have a body, and your soul is even denser than the others. Since the story was so interesting, the Nu Mou agrees to help you get your friends home. But of course it'll need some help doing its field research, which the Scions have no problem with. Paglth'an immediately starts trying to solve your problem, and proves that its knowledge is very useful when it tells you that your souls are too unstable to survive if put in white auracite. To stay in the form that resembles a real body, the Scion souls have been steadily absorbing ether. That process would have to be stopped for them to be safely stored in the auracite, and the ether they absorbed would have to be removed. That will leave their minds to drift, unable to interact with anything until they're put back in their bodies. They'd basically become what Ardbert was. Their bodies would become mindless husks, similar to the people at Journey's Head who have been being corrupted by light ether. Paglth'an hadn't heard about this and wants to see them so it can better understand what Eorzea is talking about, and the Nu Mou may be able to figure out a way to save the people. While you all head to Journey's Head, Y'shtola decides her time would be better spent helping Urianger. I just think she didn't feel like walking around in any more unpleasant locations for a while. We all know black mages don't like to move much, even if they're standing in AoE circles. The Exarch decides to work on the auracite too, so you, Paglth'an, and the twins head out to Amarang. When you all arrive, Paglth'an immediately sees that Halric's ether is shifted way too far to the light side, and he's on the verge of becoming a Sin Eater. But Eorzea can see that he's gotten a bit better, which makes Paglth'an think that there may be a chance to save him. If the treatment the Nu Mou has in mind works, that is. In one experiment, it had made a potion that could stimulate the body's ether. The potion won't reverse what's going on, but it should do something. For some of the patients, the potion makes them show some signs of improvement, but for the ones as far gone as Halric, it doesn't do anything. Even though restoring the night to the world will make people's ether rebalance naturally over time, that's only for the ether of their physical bodies. The soul is a little harder to heal. Halric might get better eventually, but it could take years, or even decades. Alisay doesn't want to give up on him though, and fortunately Paglth'an thinks that there may be something useful to be learned from trying to save the boy. Something that could help with safely sending the Scions home. Paglth'an's next idea is to summon a familiar, since they can amplify the ether poured into them, which makes them useful for casting spells that you wouldn't be able to pull off without help. Since Alisay doesn't really want to hear a long drawn out explanation on how familiars work, Paglth'an sends you all out to grab some clay, water, and a lantern full of pixie magic, which means it's back to the land of the pixies, something the twins really don't want to do after the little flying monsters played with them the last time. But it has to be done, so while they do that, you head to the miners at Twine to see about that special clay you need. Since you were last there, Chinooz has helped the miners with the Talos, which will make things a lot easier for them. It also makes it easier for you to get what you need. With the clay in hand, you get back to Paglth'an, and it seems like the twins are back too, which means the pixies didn't torture them too much this time. With everything you need in hand, Paglth'an gets started on crafting the familiar, but Alisay wants to know if she could learn to cast the spell, since she did say that she would help the people at Journey's Head, and she feels like it's her responsibility. Her desire to help is something that can actually make the spell stronger, so the Nu Mou thinks she's the perfect person for the job. However, there's one issue. The clay needs to be shaped into a porksy, and she is absolutely horrible at all things art. The sculpture looks absolutely terrible, but it doesn't have to be pretty to do the job. With a little focus and the spell Paglth'an taught her, Alisay summons a porksy that, thankfully, looks nothing like the thing she carved, and it has the energy inside of it to restore Halric's soul, in theory. All it needs now is a name, and then it'll do her bidding. So, in a shout out to Final Fantasy VIII, Alisay names her porksy Angelo after Rinoa's dog, and he gets to work on Halric. As the porksy pours ether into the boy, he starts to talk and cry, and Paglth'an can see the color of his soul coming back, meaning it's working. It'll still be a while before the boy is fully recovered, and he'll need more treatments, but a road to recovery has been found. But the spell takes a lot out of the caster and the patient, so you can't do it all at once or everyone involved will die. The upside is seeing how a stagnant soul could be reactivated. Paglth'an has an idea of how to make a soul stagnant, which is what needs to happen to send the Scions back to the source. But that's not the most important discovery. Alisay thinks this treatment could work on curing tempering. Of course, the soul is complex and requires more study, so Alisay wants to stay at the end to keep working on improving the treatment, although Paglth'an thinks she should rest. You don't get a chance to try to convince her to sit down because Kaishir comes running up screaming about trouble in Yulmore. Lady Chai is frantic, so of course you and Alphino go to check on the woman. She's so paranoid because Chinooz has apparently disappeared. After the Mount Golg incident, the people of Yulmore decided they needed a new leader, on account of the last one being a now dead Light Warden, but no one really wanted the job. So after a lot of whining and complaining, Chinooz got picked as the new mayor, which he is the perfect choice for, but not long after he was picked, he disappeared. But Chinooz isn't really one to run away from his responsibilities. He'll complain, a lot, but he's not going to just run away, especially without his wife. There has to be another reason he's gone, and you and Alphino promise to find out what it is, which is enough to put Dulia Chai at ease. With a little bit of questioning, you find that Chinooz has been going around the city talking to people about different ways to improve Yulmore, like by letting people outside of the city pay to visit the honeybee and stuff. After chatting with a few people, he apparently left the city, which likely means he went to talk to some of the people in the nearby settlements around Yulmore, so you, Alphino, and Kaishir head out to search for him. You find him in one of the outer villages, and he can't understand why any of you were wondering where he was since he did leave a note for his wife. And nothing in that letter said he was taking the job as mayor, not until he's gotten together the resources needed to solve the city's problems. In his conversations with the people, he's found some people who are willing to help with the issues of Yulmore, but there's one person whose assistance he needs if he's going to become a true mayor, at least in his mind, because honestly the things he's been doing to prepare for the job prove he's the perfect person for the job. But if he feels he needs to convince someone else of his worth, then you and Alphino are more than willing to vouch for Chinooz's character. The man who he needs is named Rendon, and he had been the chief advisor to Valtry's father. He was a man with as much authority as Ranjit, so he has plenty of experience with what it takes to run a city. His help would be useful, but he could be crazy, so it might be better to ask around to find out more about the man before deciding to try and get him to help you run the city. Crystal overheard your conversation because it's not like you guys were whispering, and he doesn't really have a grudge against Yulmore or the Chais anymore, so he'll gladly help you guys out with Rendon. He's a more forgiving man than me because after trying to get me killed, there's not a chance that I'd ever have helped the people in Yulmore. Rendon is a man who has principles and no patience for anyone he thinks is half doing things. The fact that Chinese is trying to fix Yulmore works in his favor, but the fact that he feels guilty over what the city did under his previous leadership will make him a less effective leader than he could be, so Rendon likely won't work with him. The fact that he's not all that assertive doesn't help him either. Nobody follows leaders who aren't sure of themselves. Even if you turn out to be wrong, a good leader has to approach every situation with confidence. That's likely what Rendon wants to see. The man's not far away, so Tristol recommends that when Chinese goes to talk to him, he has to radiate confidence. After introducing Rendon to you, something that doesn't impress the man in the least, Chinese gives a speech about how to make the city better and such, and while it all sounds good, it's not enough. Rendon spent years writing laws and giving advice to his superiors about how to make a city where everyone benefited, but Vauthry wasn't interested in anything but controlling people, so Rendon left. His convictions had made him abandon the city, but since Chinese stayed there, that means he approved of what Vauthry did and how he led. That makes Rendon wonder just what type of nation Chinese plans on making. Chinese isn't Vauthry, and he doesn't want to be. He knows why people came to Yulmore in the first place. They wanted safety and prosperity, and the first thing he plans on doing is making sure that the city's resources are actually spread out to the people equally like they should have been in the first place. There will no longer be any free or bonded citizens in his new Yulmore. He's going to establish trade with the nearby settlements and expand to other nations of Norvrant to help the city become a truly prosperous place for everyone. Which all sounds good, but Chai admits that he's a businessman, not a king, so he needs someone with nation-running experience to help him out. He needs Rendon. The man likes the stuff that Chai is saying, but he needs to see some proof that the man can perform the duties of his office. He has to solve one major problem on his own, and that will prove he can, with the right team, be a competent leader. And the problem Rendon wants Chai to solve is the lack of food in the city. Since people are no longer eating Mio, there's a bit of a food shortage. Rendon wants to know how Chinese plans on dealing with that. He's actually put a lot of thought into that problem. At the moment, Yulmore has enough money to buy food from their neighbors, which will give them time to address the fact that the city has done nothing in the realm of agriculture. They have to repopulate the villages that used to grow food and get them up and running again. That, of course, means relations have to be restored between neighboring settlements, and some people have to be willing to leave Yulmore to work the farms. The research he's done in crafting his plan impresses Rendon, but if he wants to motivate the people, he'll need more than just a plan. He has to give them the means to rebuild, and for that, Chai falls back on what he knows best, the Talos. He doesn't have time to build them from scratch, but there are plenty of abandoned Talos wandering around Kalusia. I'm sure quite a few of them have tried to kill you once or twice, but with the right tools they can be deactivated. He has the tools for it, which will let him turn them off without breaking them. Under normal circumstances he would get you to do it, but he feels that the people need to learn to stand on their own feet, so he's going to do it himself. He does want you to make sure that none of the other creatures in the area eat him while he's working though. Not only does he take down the Talos without getting stepped on, he reprograms 3 of them to do his bidding, something that impresses Rendon enough to where the man actually would be honored to work with him. So you all return to Yulmore, where Chinese gets to work on his plans, although the sight of 3 giant Talos heading toward the city in a single file line does scare the people a little bit. However, Dooley is just happy to see her husband back, and she squeezes him until he passes out, which is not the best way to start his new job. With that done, Chinese gives an incredible speech that motivates the people to work hard for Yulmore to become a united place, free from the stain that Vauthry put on it, and the people all seem to be on board. He immediately goes to work, which means it's time for you and Alphino to head out so you can get back to working on more important things, like getting the Scions home. Back at the Crystarium, the news has already reached the Exarch about the new mayor of Yulmore, but in other news, after talking to Paglth'an, Y'shtola and Urianger realize that white auracite won't actually work for the soul transfer, since making the soul's ether dormant would also destroy their minds. They could put their minds into the auracite instead, but that would destroy their souls. Since that idea is a bust, they've all been working on finding a way to send their minds and souls together. The Exarch actually has a bit of knowledge in that area since Unai and Doga were able to transfer their Allagan eye to him, which allows him to link his mind to the Crystal Tower. That all happened a long time ago during your trip into the Crystal Tower, which I've already covered on this channel. But if they can learn how the Allagan technology worked, then that may be the key to transferring the mind and soul together. They're basically trying to make a soul crystal that holds both the memories and the soul of a person. While they work on that, Y'shtola wants you to go back to the source and tell Kral and the others the plan, and to see if they have any ideas that could help speed things up. Back on the source, while you discuss things with the Scions, things start to go insane in Garlemald. With the death of the Emperor, civil war erupts throughout the nation as various factions fight to take over. Xenos is watching the chaos without all that much interest when an Ascian that he doesn't know comes up to him. The Ascian isn't unsundered, but he knows that Xenos is planning on hunting Zodiark, and he wants to help. That's not the only strange thing that happens. Back in Yulmore, in the midst of the people working to restore the city, Ardbert, fully alive, body and all, comes walking into the city. When you get back to Tataru and Kral lets you know that Matoya, the real one, not Y'shtola, has stabilized the Scions' ether for now. It won't last, so you need to get them back to their bodies as soon as possible. While you talk, Maxima, a Galdian ally of yours, shows up with some urgent news. He's been working with Raban to hopefully end the conflict with the Empire, but from what he's heard, the Empire is in total chaos. They pulled a lot of members back to their homeland from Gimlet, so the Alliance is pulled back too. Now the only people who are watching the border are the Alamican resistance. But at the border he ran into someone who told him that the situation in Garlemald is going to get worse, so Raban has called a meeting to discuss what to do, and he wants the Scions there. Kral decides to go with you, so the two of you head out to Alamigo to see what new disaster you have to deal with now. When you arrive, you're surprised to see Gaius there. While you were on the first, he and Estinian were working together to deal with Black Rose, and they ended up in the Imperial Palace where they saw Xenos kill Varys. And since they were the only witnesses, and no one would believe them if they said they didn't do it since they weren't supposed to be there anyway, they had to run away. They went different ways out of the city, but when they met back up, Estinian told Gaius about a strange machine that he'd fought. What he described seemed familiar, so Gaius looked into it and found that the Empire was building a new Ultima Weapon. The 7th Legion has done a very good job rebuilding the thing after you destroyed it since they've been put under new leadership. Gaius doesn't know who the new leader is or how they managed to do what they've done with the weapon, but he does know that a few prototypes have been made and one is on its way to Eorzea as we speak. Gaius tried to stop it, but all he succeeded in doing was slowing it down a bit, so he figured he would do better by warning you all. Raban already started bolstering the forces at Gimlet to get ready for the threat, and he wants you to lead the charge if you can. Even though you're busy with the Scions, this is important, so you join Gaius in the battle with the weapons, which I've covered in the Sorrow of Worldlet series on this channel, so check it out because that story was very good, especially for people who want to know more about Gaius and get a bit of Final Fantasy VII nostalgia. Despite the danger of the weapons, you are definitely the only person who can help the Scions, so you have to head back to the first to tell them all about what's happened with the weapons and Xenos. There's a bit of good news when you make it back. The Exarch has made some progress on his end, but first everyone wants to know what's happening on the source. The talk of the new Ultima Weapon makes Alphinaud grateful for Gaius' help, but Y'shtola is more worried about what other issues will come out of a fractured Garlemald. But there's nothing to be done until you get the Scions back to the source, and the Exarch believes that mission is nearly accomplished because Urianger and Beck Luke have made a vessel that can safely take their minds and souls on the journey. It's a crystal that has the properties of white auracite without that nasty business of destroying either the mind or the soul when you put someone in it. This new spirit vessel can hold them both safely, but there's still the small issue of making it have the power to actually draw them both in. For that, the spirit vessel has to be given the same gift that the Exarch has, which only comes from Allagan blood. Without that, there's no way to transfer the Scions' minds into the crystals, which means they have to study a little bit more about the ancient Allagans, and there are plenty of books in the tower that might have the information they need. Whatever it takes, the Exarch promises to see the Scions home. Lena comes into the room and she wants to talk to you about something, and since Alphinaud doesn't have the skills to help the Exarch with what he's working on, he decides to come with you to help Lena with whatever she wants. Plus he just wants to step outside for a bit. Apparently a Sin Eater's been seen in Lakeland, and Lena wants you to help with it. It's not all that big of a deal, but she wants her men to fight beside the Warrior of Darkness to keep them from getting complacent in these peaceful times. The Warrior of Light is always eager to stab something, especially when she has an audience, so you head out with a few soldiers who you have met on various occasions around the Crystarium. You're all prepped and ready for the fight, but when you arrive, the Sin Eater is already dead. Apparently, some random man came out and soloed the beast with one swing of his axe. He claimed to be a warrior of light before he just wandered off again. It's a strange title to willingly claim considering how the people on the first feel about the warriors of light, but that's what the guy said. Since there's nothing to do without a Sin Eater, Lena figures that you may as well head back to the Crystarium, but before you go, she wants to talk to you about the Exarch. Since the trip to the Tempest, he's changed. He seems happy for the first time in forever. She's glad to see that, but she thinks she should stay away so she doesn't make him think back on the bad days of the past. Some people are just really bad at reading people. Lena is practically the Exarch's daughter and she's been by his side for years. He probably doesn't see anything but good memories when he looks at her, and you tell her that, which makes her feel a little bit better. So she decides to get back to her role of parenting the Exarch, starting by telling him to take a break from all the working he's been doing. Back in the Crystarium, Alphino actually has something he wants to talk about. He's been seeing a lot more people in the Cabinet of Curiosity looking through books with information about the years leading up to the Flood. He thinks they're looking up stuff about the Warriors of Light, but all of the old books call them Sin Eaters, or worse. He thinks that this random guy showing up and calling himself a Warrior of Light along with all the people suddenly interested in them could end up leading to a lot of things getting out of hand. So he thinks the best way to fix this problem is to tell the truth about Ardbert and what he and his friends actually did for the world. While they did cause the Flood, they weren't villains like everyone thinks. Even the Exarch only knew the truth about them because of the information that was in the Crystal Tower, but their reputations were destroyed before he even got to the first, despite the fact that some people knew how much good they had done and praised them for it. Even Paglth'an remembers them fondly, so it's only right that you try to repair their reputations, especially since you'd be dead without Ardbert, and the best way to repair the reputations of the Warriors of Light is to tell the people exactly what Ardbert did for them. So the Scions agree to call together the people of the Crystarium and tell them the whole story. Everyone gathers and you tell them everything from how Ardbert and the others started the Flood by accident while trying to save everyone, then how they gave their lives to travel to another world to fix the mistakes they made. It's an impressive tale that does change the way that people feel about the fallen heroes, but things start to get a little weird when you see Ardbert walk into the crowd. At first the Warrior of Light thought that only she could see him just like last time, until Alphino notices him too. One of the soldiers recognizes him as the man who claimed to be a Warrior of Light when he killed that Sin Eater. Ardbert had planned on revealing the truth about the Warriors of Light on the first, but your speech saved him the trouble, although he does have a bit to add to the story. He announces that he is the Ardbert that you were talking about. He claims that he was given new life just like the first, yet he doesn't know why. The planet must have just wanted him to come back. Before you can contradict this story that you know is a load of chocobo crap, he tells everyone that you're from another world and you'll have to leave them soon. Then the people of the Crystarium will have to protect themselves by becoming Warriors of Light. The fact that people can just become Warriors of Light is shocking to hear, but Ardbert explains that at first he was just an adventurer, but he constantly chose to fight for those in need, and that led him to where he is now, and anyone can do that. There is far more to it than that, but he's won over the crowd so they listen as he goes on and on. But one thing you are positive of, that man's not Ardbert. But the people are eating up what he's saying, so speaking out against him after you just shouted his praises won't end well, so you and the Scions go back into the tower to talk. All except for Alphino, who decides to watch the rest of the speech. Paglth'an recognizes the man as Ardbert, but the resurrection story is impossible since Ardbert's soul is still with you. Y'shtola can still see the power the merger gave you, so Ardbert hasn't separated from you again. It makes Urianger think of this Ardbert like a cardinal virtue, although he isn't a Sin Eater, and if he's not a Sin Eater, then he's almost definitely an Ascian. The bodies of the first Warriors of Light were buried at Yulmore. 4 of them were made into the cardinal virtues, but if anyone knew where to look, Ardbert's body shouldn't have been too hard to find. Y'shtola figures that the Ascian most likely to get the body is the last of the Unsundered, Elidibus. Since he left Xenos' body, it makes sense that he would come to the first to finish what Emmett Selk started. The fact that Ascians possess dead bodies on the regular is something that Paglth'an finds odd, but since they have no physical bodies of their own, it's pretty common. And in their natural state, the only people who can see them are ones with the echo. That's why when Elidibus had showed up at the Wakened Sands forever ago, only you and Menphilia could see him. They can't just possess anyone either, because if they could, I'm sure Elidibus would have Orochimaru'd your body a long time ago. That's a Naruto reference for those of you who don't know. However, it's strange that Ardbert's body was able to be taken. If the blessing of light keeps Ascians from being able to take bodies, does it mean that protection stops with their death, or did it fade when Ardbert's soul merged with yours? Y'shtola has a lot of questions that she will probably spend a lot of time trying to find answers for, but the biggest one is, why isn't Ascian using Ardbert to create warriors of light? He's always been weird as far as Ascians go, but when Urianger had worked with him, he had learned that the Ascian is no slouch when it comes to manipulating people. So whatever you think he's doing, it's likely something completely different. But after your speech, you can't very well talk bad about the man of the people, but you definitely need to keep an eye on him, something that Alphinaud has already decided to do. While he tracks the Ascian, Urianger decides to go tell Reen and Thancred what's going on, because when the fight happens, you'll all need to be there. While he's doing that, Y'shtola decides to head back to the Great Wood to see if she can learn more about the Ascians. Apparently an unexplored part of the Katana Revel has been discovered. Almet thinks the relics inside talk about a great calamity that happened to an ancient civilization, which might be the Ascians. That's something you're more than a little curious about too, so you head out to Fanau to meet up with your favorite bunny girls. Almet is happy to tell you that since the last time you were there, her people have reclaimed their land near the Raktika Falls, which is where they found the ruins. They didn't hit any traps, but the deeper chambers are warded by magic, so they decided to wait for you since the Scions have no self-preservation skills. Almet is ready to go, but she is pretty sure that whatever the Ronkans have guarding the central chamber is going to be strong since there were no traps in any other part of this new area, which is something that doesn't seem to faze her younger sisters at all. The two girls run off like excited high school students, so you all have to follow them. This new chamber has a statue of an extra creepy thing that looks very lifelike, but the owl statue that's on the pedestal next to it looks just like the ones you had to move before to open other doors. And there's an empty pedestal right next to a sealed door with a spot for that exact statue. The puzzle looks way too simple, so Y'shtola wants to study things a bit more before you do something that gets you all killed. And after she reads the inscription on the pedestal, she realizes that the entire thing is a trap. Of course, Wimet grabs the statue before Y'shtola can stop her, which does exactly what you should have expected and wakes up the creepy looking statue. The first thing it does is teleport you all the way to a strange room where it turns your friends into cards and forces you to solve its riddles to save them. The thing is exactly like a sphinx from ancient Egyptian lore, except even after you solve its riddles correctly, it gives you a test of strength where it tries to murder you. It makes a very good attempt at ending you all, but the 5 of you manage to beat it, which makes it send you back to the other chamber and open the door for you. Inside of the formerly sealed room is a tomb for a woman who Almet thinks is the Archmage Tyuna. She was a legendary Ronkan hero who was said to be so powerful that she could take down entire armies with a single spell. It was also said that Tyuna could see the truths that were long lost and could hear the voices of men's hearts. So in other words, she had the echo. The wall has a message on it beneath a mural that says, "By the light of fallen stars, power awakens," which makes Y'shtola think that those star showers that set the sky on fire have something to do with the appearance of people with the echo. And the mural on this wall not only looks exactly like the other one you saw in the Revel, but it looks like what Emin made you go through in Amarat. From what the Exarch said, the soul and mind share a bond, making it possible for a very traumatic event to leave a mark on the soul that could be activated by the right trigger. The echo is something that they haven't been able to figure out by any conventional means, but that could be because it's just a remnant, or an echo, of a power that the ancient Unsundered people had. It's all just a theory that Y'shtola has, but it is a very good one. There's still more to learn, but it won't be learned in the tomb, so you all head back to Fanau. Almet lets you know that the story of Tyuna has been handed down for generations, and with each telling it changes a little, so there's no real way to know what really happened since none of you lived through it. She feels that the same will eventually happen with your story, but she promises to do her best to preserve it too. This little trip didn't teach you anything about the Ascians, but the info you got about the Echo makes Y'shtola think the trip was worthwhile. Still, it's time to head back, but she wants to stop in Slitherbough first. She wanted to talk to Runar, who was in the middle of preparing a meal that he pretty much forces Y'shtola to agree to join, so since this won't be a short trip anymore, she decides to take the time to clean her room. And by clean it, she means to enchant a broom like Mickey Mouse did in Fantasia and let it do all of the work, which means if she could have done that all along, there was no reason for her room to be that disgusting. But they do say geniuses have messy rooms, so I guess it fits. While the broom cleans, Y'shtola realizes that she's going to miss the people here once she's gone, and because Runar's eavesdropping, he overhears, which doesn't do much for his mood. You all sit and eat, but you're barely into your meal before the twins and Urianger show up. Apparently Alphinaud had followed Ardbert, but he lost him when he made it into the woods. The Ascian has been going everywhere to spread the truth about the Warriors of Light and the Flood. Alphinaud still can't figure out why he's trying to get people to follow the path of the Warrior of Light, but he's caused more than a handful of people to do it, which means whatever he's planning is working, and it'll probably be bad. He's likely on his way to Slitherbough at that very moment. The way he would get people to listen to him is he would go and deal with a Sin Eater to help the locals, so if you hunt down some of the eaters in the area nearby, you might catch up to him. Thancred and Reen are apparently back from the empty and are working on hunting for the likely target, so you all set out to meet them. There aren't nearly as many Sin Eaters as there used to be, and when you see Thancred and Reen, they've already dealt with the one that was nearby. Turns out that's the one Ardbert was looking for, and he shows up like you expected. He mentions some things about how you had first met when he and his friends took down Ravana before you could get there, but he gives himself away when he messes up and says Seto is dead and he'll miss him. Since he's been outed, he reveals that he is in fact Elidibus, but you knowing doesn't matter since he wasn't really trying to trick you anyway. He is acting out the will of the convocation, and lying to you is unnecessary, but unlike Emmett, Elidibus has no intention of sharing information with you or pretending like you're anything close to equals. Regardless of what Emmett's last words were to you, Elidibus doesn't see any common ground between you. He has his duty, and it will be done. The Ascian leaves without telling you anything, so Y'shtola figures that if she wants to learn more about the Ascians, another trip to the Tempest is in order. However, Urianger doesn't think you'll learn all that much from the Amarat that Emmett Selk had made, but the ruins of the real city are down there too, and if what you saw in the Ronkan ruins was anything to go off of, there's a lot you could learn from these new ruins too. Which means it's time for another trip to see the Ondo, since trying to explore everything on your own would take forever. The Ondo chief knows of some ruins that you haven't seen, but at the moment he can't send anyone to guide you. The Benthos, another tribe of Ondo who are pretty violent, decided to raid the food stores of the chief and his people instead of hunting their own. The problem is the Ondo don't have the warriors needed to really deal with them and get their stuff back, but it turns out that you guys just so happen to be warriors, and since you're asking for help, offering your combat skills as payment is more than a fair trade since you like sticking pointy objects and things anyway. And you did change the entire ecosystem in the area, so the changes in the hunting grounds are kinda your fault. The Benthos have taken what they've stolen back to an area called Flounder's Floor that has a lot of guards, so you'll all have to sneak in to recover what you need. It turns out that the Benthos have been raiding the storehouses all across Kalusia, not just stealing from other Ondo, which means they're planning something, but you and the others can figure that out once you've gotten back to the chief with their food. The chief is happy to hear of your success, and he does have some idea as to why the Benthos are hoarding so much food. They're planning on claiming the ruins that you're interested in studying for themselves. The place has only just been discovered, so the Ondo weren't all that sure about why the Benthos were so eager to take the place, but adding that to the fact that they are hoarding food means their queen is about to give birth and they need the space and food for her and the babies to grow. That sounds pretty normal, but the various Ondo tribes keep their breeding to a minimum because of the scarcity of resources. If the Benthos have decided to change things, it's because they are building an army to attack the surface dwellers. Their queen recently went around seeking allies among the other Ondo tribes, and when they all refused to team up and attack the surface, she apparently decided to get her army by other means. Since things are about to get bloody, the Scions would rather get to the ruins without bringing any Ondo, so the chief gives you all directions. The place is even deeper underwater than Amarat, so if you want to actually go there, you'll need to get Bismarck to help again, which means it's time for a swim, but Urianger plans on doing things a little bit differently. He's perfected his water walking trick and he wants to show you. Even though if he just put that effort into learning how to swim, he could have avoided all the hassle. But it's Urianger, so he has to make simple things complicated. Ironically enough, it actually works. For all the 20 feet before he gets dizzy and sinks, forcing Thancred to dive in to save him. The technique worked fine, but it seemed like Urianger's body had started to fail him. Thancred seems a little weak too, but he shrugs it off and you all decide to take the boat that was parked not 3 feet away from you the entire time. Now that Bismarck knows you work with Titania, he's more than willing to take you where you need to go, so you all ride to the ruins beneath the sea, where you run into a whole lot of Benthos before finishing off their queen in typical Warrior of Light fashion. These ruins seem to be far from ruined, and it has a lot of large crystals around that the ancient people used to store ideas and concepts for them to use in their creation magic. With there being so many of them, in the ancient days before the Sundering, this place must have been extremely important. One of the crystals activates and you see the image of a group of ancient Ascians having a meeting after the summoning of Zodiark had stopped the final days. And although they had been saved, these Ascians felt that it was only a temporary solution. If they continued as they had before, they would end up in the same position again. But despite arguing with the convocation, they wouldn't listen. They had tried to recruit the member of the group who had quit, but just because she didn't want to help the convocation, didn't mean she wanted to help the opposition either. Vanat, the leader of the group, doesn't have any anger toward the others since they're just trying to save the world in their own way. But their way isn't a permanent solution, and that's what she wants, even if it means being hated by the rest of her people. Since the others agree, they move forward with their plan to summon Hydaelyn. Now the Scions know how the summoning of Hydaelyn began, but even when Emet-Selch had mentioned their opposition, he had never mentioned Vanat. But it seems like you all have found our faction's headquarters, and Y'shtola is eager to see what other information the crystals hold. She presses a button and the image of Vanat talking to another ancient one appears. The ancient Ascian is trying to stop her from sacrificing herself to summon Zodiark, but far fewer of the people support their cause than those who believed in Zodiark. So if Hydaelyn is going to be on equal footing with him, then she'll have to become her heart. But Vanat doesn't think she'll die in the process, she just won't be the same. Before the vision ends, the Ascian wonders if the convocation felt as reluctant to let Elidibus become the heart of Zodiark as the others are to let Vanat become the heart of Hydaelyn. That brings up a major question. If Elidibus became the heart of Zodiark, how is he even walking around in Ardbert's body at all? I think a better question is, where is Vanat? Y'shtola of course wants more answers, but the machine that let her activate the crystal seems to be out of power, which means it needs to be reactivated before you can find any more answers. And considering the fact that Elidibus ceased to exist even before the Sundering, who are you dealing with? Emet-Selch had mentioned that the names you know the Ascians by aren't the ones they were born with, but they're their titles. Emet-Selch was a title, his real name was Hades, which means the Elidibus you're dealing with may have been the person who filled the role of emissary after his predecessor became Zodiark's heart. But Y'shtola doesn't think that's it. She decides to stay behind and keep working on getting the machine running so she can get some more answers. While she does that, the rest of you will head back to the surface since you can't really help her. Plus you need to check with the Exarch to see how close he is to finishing the spirit vessels. When you get back there is a bit of a problem in the Crystarium. A lot of people who work in the city have gathered and they want to quit their jobs to go off and become warriors of light. It's not like they're forced to do their jobs, but if the city loses a large number of people all at once, it could cripple the entire thing, so the Exarch wants them to hold off on leaving until replacement workers can be found. When some of the arguing people see you, they try to explain that they want to go out into the world like you did so they could help people, and while that is what you did, you were never a pivotal figure in the workings of a nation. You were always only responsible for yourself. These people are abandoning their duty in search of a dream, but there's nothing you can really say to change their minds or stop the chaos that'll come if large groups of people around the world just drop what they're doing and leave to become adventurers, which means you really have to stop Elidibus, but he's a mile ahead of you. The sky grows dark and stars begin to fall, and all across the city people start to hear a voice inside of their head telling them 3 words that you should remember: hear, feel, think. They're hearing the voice of Hydaelyn as they gain the echo. As people gain the echo, Elidibus shows up telling them that they are now warriors of light. Then the star shower vanishes like it was never there. After he welcomes the people into the fold, Elidibus goes to leave, but Alphinaud stops him. The Ascian admits that he did make the star shower. It was just an illusion used to wake up the power in people's broken souls, but he's still not going to tell you his plan. He does confirm that the echo is a remnant of the power that you all had when you were unsundered, and even the strongest wielders of that power only have a small piece of what they had in the past. Which means, despite what you all thought, the echo is not Hydaelyn's power. The echo just lets people hear her, and by hearing her, you can gain the blessing of light. And when Hydaelyn needs new servants, she simply makes an illusion like Elidibus did, which makes Urianger wonder why would Elidibus make new servants for his enemy. But Elidibus never said Hydaelyn was his enemy. He's a warrior of light, and he plans on saving the world. He leaves without saying anything else, but he definitely succeeded at confusing you and causing a lot of people to leave the city on their quest. Since there's nothing he can do to stop them from leaving now, the Exarch wants you to give the people some advice before they head out. Just because they're being put on their path by an Ascian doesn't mean they aren't good people. The people are flattered that you would come to see them off, and they definitely plan on following your advice and making you proud. With that done, you head back to the tower to figure out what to do next, since you not only have no idea what Elidibus is planning, you don't have any idea how to go about finding out. So it's all up to Y'shtola to see if what she can learn in the ruins helps you deal with the Ascian. Thancred decides to put his skills to use and track the Ascian, and for once he won't let Ring come. She's gotten good at stealth, but she's nowhere near as good as he is, and she may make him get caught. So the others will stay at the tower to keep Elidibus from getting suspicious while they help the Exarch with the vessels. He still hasn't found the means of putting your minds and souls inside of the crystal, so there's a lot of work left to do, but if the Scions all pitch in, it should go smoothly. As for you, it's best that you take this opportunity to take a nap since you likely won't have much time for a break in the future. Of course, while you try to rest, Tainer, the young mage who you worked with on your hunt for one of the cardinal virtues, comes by to talk. He wants to know about the strange star shower, so you tell him everything about the fake Ardbert, which after his experience of having to face the body of one of his friends, he can relate. He actually makes you feel better about the fact that very soon you will have to face off against the body of your friend, because it's definitely heading that way. In the meantime, the Exarch has decided that he might have to use his own blood to successfully put the Scions' souls in the vessels, and there's no telling what doing that will do to him. As you all prepare for the trials ahead, Xenos wanders through the streets of the burning city of Amarat in a dream that he's been having for his entire life, which would explain why he's crazy. Dreaming of the final days would drive anyone insane, especially if they're doing it as a kid. In spite of the star shower and the rise of the new warriors of light, the Crystarium is still extremely active. It's so active that Morin actually leaves the Cabinet of Curiosity to come and thank you for telling everyone the truth about Ardbert and the other warriors of light. Being the bookworm that he is, he wants to write down your thoughts on everything that happened to add it to the information that they already have. Now, just like the Echo, the whole concept of Warrior of Light is something that you don't really know all that much about, so you decide to join Morin in the cabinet so you can find out a little more, especially when he says that Ardbert's resurrection might not be all that strange after all. Alphino, Alice, and Reen also show up at the cabinet, and although they were all there for their own reasons, they'd love to hear more about the Warriors of Light too. Morin is always happy to have people to talk to, so he dives into his lecture with a big smile on his face. Warriors of Light have appeared all throughout the history of the world. Some of them are names you've heard of, like Tyuna and Ramza. Before the Flood, the term Warrior of Light basically meant hero, but when the light became something to be afraid of, that changed. In the oldest stories of the Warrior of Light on Novrant, the land was shrouded in darkness when a hero showed up to save the world. Since he fought in the name of the light, he became known as the Warrior of Light. As time passed, others appeared with the same title, even though they had no connection to the original. Eventually, all of the greatest heroes got that title too. The same thing pretty much happened on the Source, as you well know. It's very likely all of those people had the Echo, and by hearing Hydaelyn's voice, they ended up on their path. But the Echo doesn't necessarily make you a hero, or even a fighter, because one-on-one people like Thancred and Estinian can go toe-to-toe with any hero. And Thancred can't even use Ether, let alone the Echo. It makes Alice wonder if the same was true on every shard, and it makes you realize that you're not all that special. While you're all chatting, a group of children who are also interested in the Warriors of Light knock over some books trying to get to you, something that does not make Morin happy since those books are extremely important to him. It seems like Rikitio, Arkil, and Erwil do this kind of thing a lot because Morin knows them all by name. When they see you, they're all super excited, and they want to know what it takes to become a Warrior of Light. And since it's so cute to see children wanting to do something productive with their time, you actually talk to them. Rikitio, the little Mikote, is the most interesting because she doesn't want to fight with swords. She wants to fight with potions and heal people. For the longest time, the dealings with her and her quest to become a potion-slinging healer made us all think that the next healer job would be some type of apothecary, but Square Enix trolled us all and made Sage, which has absolutely nothing to do with this little girl. Still, it was a peaceful experience. Teaching the kids how to fight will likely bear fruit sometime in the future, but there's only so much time you can take away from the important things, like getting the Scions back home, because the dizzy spells that had hit Thancred and Urianger before hit Alice now, which means being separated from their bodies is starting to hurt them even worse. But instead of going to see how the Exarch is coming with the whole sending them back thing, you get the strange urge to head to the top of the Crystarium. What's even more weird is Elidibus shows up there, and he's confused because he only came because you called him. For the first time in a long time, the echo hits you, and you see 13 ancient Ascians welcoming a 14th member to the convocation. The one speaking for the group says that sometimes this new member will be on their side, and sometimes not, all for the sake of guiding mankind and the planet in the direction they need to go, because this person is taking the seat of Elidibus, the emissary, and that's his duty. Elidibus can tell that you were looking into his memories, but he doesn't care now that he realizes you called him by accident. But since you have him there, you try again to find out what he's planning. He is basically doing what you've done over and over again, gathering weapons and leveling up, all to beat the final boss of the trial, which is you. He's doing all of this because you've killed his brothers and destroyed what they had worked to build. It's funny how you're angry at the Ascians for killing your friends, yet you've done the same thing to theirs. Elidibus sees you as the walking embodiment of death, and he plans on putting an end to you. Your death is what it will take to save the world, but he's not ready to fight you. Yet. He did see your fight with Emmett Selk, and he seemed to recognize you, but Elidibus doesn't. He doesn't know if that's because he had never met you before the Sundering, or if that's just another piece of his memory that he's lost. While you and the Ascian talk, the Exarch shows up, and Elidibus hits him with some spell that the Exarch more or less shrugs off. That catches Elidibus off guard because despite not having Hydaelyn's blessing, the Exarch's soul is dense. Elidibus leaves without saying more, yet while the Exarch didn't take damage from the Ascian's attack, he still looks a little ragged. He claims he did that damage to himself during his experiments. The more he uses the tower's power, the more his body turns into a crystal. It's not bothering him right now, but Paglth'an still sent him away so he could rest. Probably because the Nu Mou knew he was lying. The Exarch knows he's being a bit reckless with his health, and he has no intention of slowing down because he believes he's doing what it takes to save his friends. And with the Scions dying slowly, he's planning on being even more reckless in the future, so he wants to ask you a favor. Before he can say what he's thinking, Reen comes running up to give you some bad news. Thancred collapsed. When Reen and Alysae had come back from dealing with the children, Thancred was just coming back too. He'd followed Elidibus for a while, but he lost sight of him near the Crystarium. He was in the middle of telling them about his mission when he just passed out. He's in the hospital and Alphino's with him, so you all go to check on him. He's not all that happy to have people fawning over him, but he needed to be checked out because his condition had nothing to do with any physical injury. His ether is becoming more unstable, but Alphino did what he could to stabilize it. This isn't the first time he felt like he was going to pass out. That time when Urianger had nearly drowned and he dove in the water to save him, he had felt the same way, and the lightheaded feeling had never left, but this is the first time he actually passed out, which means the link between his body and soul has gotten even weaker. So the Exarch wants you to head back to the source to let Kryle know about your plan and see if she has any objections before you all move forward. While you do that, Thancred wants to keep working on the Elidibus problem because he learned something that could mean trouble. Everywhere he's gone, there have been sightings of strange people wearing all black, and when they show up, things go bad in the area. Monsters attack people, crops die, and stuff like that. These problems make Elidibus call for new warriors of light, which people rush to become to fight against these growing threats. Thancred thinks these people are Ascians, but he'll need to investigate this. Of course, Alysae and the other Scions are willing to help, after Thancred gets some rest. When you get back to the source, Tataru is freaking out because the Scions are not doing well. Kryle's been struggling to keep them stable for the past few days, so the news of the spirit vessels being a means of bringing the Scions home is welcome. They look so lifeless on the source compared to how they are on the first, and the changes came all of a sudden. One minute they were doing well, then all of a sudden they just started to die. Even Matoya didn't know why. But Kryle has managed to stabilize Thancred again, so that's something. But it really won't last, so she wants you to tell the Exarch to try whatever plan he has in mind as soon as possible. But if you need more information on the Alligans to help make sure things go smoothly, Kryle does have someone she can go and see. While she goes off to meet her contact, Tataru whips up this bread called Archon Loaf that she wants you to take to the Scions on the first to both remind them of home and to help stabilize their ether a bit. The bread is a Charlian specialty, and although both Kryle and Rambros, Kryle's Allagan expert, say the bread tastes like boiled shoelaces, that's apparently exactly how it's supposed to taste. So, I guess it's good. I'm a picky eater, so there's no way I could eat something that is supposed to be disgusting, but that's just me, I guess. Unfortunately, Rambros can't help with the memory transference process, but he does want you to let G'raha know that they never doubted him. So with the disgusting yet incredibly healthy Charlene bread in tow, you head back to the first. The Exarch is excited to see the bread, but he'll eat it later because he needs a bit of prep time before he can make himself swallow the stuff. The Scions show up not long after you arrive, and Thancred confirms that there are Ascians all over the realm, but they are only the lower ranked black masked ones. The wannabe heroes from the Crystarium are out doing good deeds, but Thancred thinks it'll be best if you all deal with the Ascians fast. The Scions take the news of their dying bodies pretty well, but they do want to know if the spirit vessels are ready. They are, and after giving you an incredibly long explanation about how they solved the memory transference problem by crystallizing the Exarch's blood, Paglth'an lets you know that the only thing left to do is test the things. However, everyone can see what all of this work is doing to the Exarch's arm, but he reminds Alicey that she said he couldn't die to save them, so he technically hasn't broken his word. The testing process will take a while, so you all can do what needs to be done about the Ascians while you wait. However, Alicey notices that there are 6 spirit vessels instead of 5. The Exarch plans on testing one on himself, and if it works, in theory, he could take his soul to the source. That process would be a little different from the Scion since he has a physical body that is not missing a soul. It's possible that their 2 souls will merge, or they could explode. There's no way to really know, but he's willing to risk it, so you all head out to let the Exarch and Paglth'an get back to work. The way the Exarch acted like he didn't know whether his soul would merge with his body on the source turns out to be a lie. Urianger says that the man knows that the process will work. However, he's experienced an extra rejoining since he lived through the 8th calamity that you stopped, which would have altered his ether a bit, and that might make the merger difficult. But since you and Ardbert merged successfully, Urianger thinks the Exarch will be fine. Anyway, while the Exarch works, you all need to deal with Elidibus. However, since the Scions' bodies are breaking down, Thancred doesn't think Y'shtola should be left in the Aniter alone. So you go to check on her while the others go to deal with the Ascians. After you get her, you can all meet up at Yulmore. Before you head off, you hand them all some of the Archon loaf, which they're all excited about. For the taste of home, not the taste of the bread. Reen wants to try it too, but I think she's going to regret it. I think Urianger is eager to see it because he makes sure that she gets a slice. When you get back to the Aniter, you find Y'shtola unconscious on the floor. You try to run to her, but Elidibus appears blocking your path. He wanted to talk to you alone, and he had nothing to do with Y'shtola's condition. He doesn't know why you're looking into the Ascian's past, but he doesn't think it will help you. Seeing him standing amongst the crystals causes the echo to kick in again, showing you a vision of Elidibus himself, being told that he needs to stop studying so much and go outside. But as you watch the memory, it fades, and you hear Elidibus start to wonder if his memories are fading because the world doesn't need him anymore. He pushes those thoughts away and focuses on the fact that he has to fulfill his duty. Even though he knows he has a job to do, he can't remember why he's working so hard to do it, or who he's even doing it for. Seeing you looking into his internal struggle seems to irritate Elidibus, so he teleports Y'shtola away. He'll give her back if you do what he asks. He wants you to show him how strong you are, and he's set up a place to test you. Since you don't really have a choice, you follow him. Ardbert teleports you back into Emmett Selk's Amarat, and because you have killed his friends and plan on destroying everything he holds dear, not to mention the fact that you've looked into his mind, he forces you to fight against versions of your friends. Since you act like a merciless killer, he didn't think slaughtering images of your friends would bother you since you casually kill people without worrying about how they are the loved ones of others. He forces you to fight your way through every major battle you've had, but he also makes you face every tragic loss. It seems like this entire exercise was meant to force you to dive into your own bad experiences since you kept diving into his. Regardless, reliving Final Fantasy XIV's greatest hits was a fun and traumatizing experience. What Elidibus is doing is trying to make you realize that the Ascians you have killed are to him what the people you have lost are to you, and he will never forgive you for taking them from him. Interestingly enough, he tries to make you fight a manifestation of Xenos, but he can't even make it do what he wants. So he finally decides to fight you himself to see how powerful you are. Elidibus is strong, but he realizes that one-on-one you are more than a match for him after all of the fighting you've done on the first and your merger with Ardbert. Not all that surprisingly, after the fight Y'shtola walks in since she's already freed herself, and she wants to talk to Elidibus about a theory she has. This theory of hers comes from the fact that she found out he's a primal. Zodiark was summoned to fulfill a single purpose, to save his people. Elidibus sacrificed himself to become Zodiark's heart, and even though he's separated from the god, he still has the desire to save his people. And that's why he went out of his way to make warriors of light out of the people. Since she figured it out, Elidibus admits that Y'shtola is right about him and about the reason he not only made heroes but became one. Not only did that make him stronger, but it let him help his brothers with their passions like Emet-Selch's desire to build nations. But that's not what Y'shtola really wants to talk about. She wants to know if Elidibus can even remember how the world used to be, or if he even remembers his friends, because a primal's very being is made from the hope of the people who summoned it, and with so many souls being used to summon Zodiark, Y'shtola wants to know if Elidibus is doing what he does because he wants to, or because of all the different souls that make up the god. To him, that doesn't matter. The why is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is his duty, and with the power he currently has, he can't beat you. But he could easily kill your friends. With those ominous last words, the Ascian leaves. All things considered, Y'shtola is happy with how things went because, aside from the whole passing out part, she figured out Elidibus' goal, and she's eager to meet back up with the others considering Elidibus' threat. But while the Ascian did teleport her away from the Uniter, he had left her stuff, so she heads back to get it. While you wait for her, you notice a red crystal on the floor. Because no one taught the Warrior of Light not to pick up strange things she sees lying on the ground in cities filled with ghosts, she grabs it. It says some words, but they don't make much sense. However, you see more crystals, so you grab them too. They clearly hold memories, but without more of them, there's no way to know what they're talking about. You find more crystals, each talking with a different voice, all telling bits and pieces of a story that someone clearly wants you to hear. The crystals were recorded during the final days, and when you find the 13th one, Hydaelyn finds you. He calls the crystals stars since each one has a constellation carved into them. Each was a symbol of a member of the Convocation of 14, and they hold information on the life of each of the members and the way the Unsundered remembered them. The crystals are meant to imbue the memories into Sundered Convocation members, so they could be returned to their office once they're reborn. It's what was done every time a fallen member of the Convocation was reborn. Since Emet-Selch is dead, Hydaelyn doesn't think he'll mind if you keep the crystals. Even though he's only a manifestation of a long-dead Ascian, Hydaelyn knows about your conflict with Elidibus, and surprisingly he'd rather you live because that's the only way you'll be able to keep your promise to Emet and remember them. That doesn't mean he doesn't understand Elidibus' devotion to his duty. The man just can't remember his reasons for what he does. But Hydaelyn didn't come to talk about Elidibus. He wants to talk about the member of the Convocation who left. Since she left her post, no crystal was made to commemorate her life. At least it wasn't supposed to be, but her friend made one in secret. It is marked with the name of her office as well as a spell she made. The 14th's office was different from the rest of the Convocation. While they stayed in Amarat, her job was to explore the world and learn about the different people. During her travels, she explored every land and made friends with a lot of different people. She solved problems that she could have handed over to the Convocation, but she preferred to team up with her friends to do it herself. Sound familiar? Because of her desire to have her allies near, she created a spell that could summon her friends to her side if she needed them. It's a power that belongs to you, since it was yours in the past, considering the fact that you were the 14th member of the Convocation. Returning your crystal to you was something that Hydaelyn can't say whether it was his idea or something Emet-Selch programmed him to do, but now that it's back where it belongs, he vanishes. Y'shtola walks up right after the Ascian fades, and for some reason the Warrior of Light decides not to tell her what happened, or what you know about yourself. So instead the two of you head back to Yulmore to meet up with the others. Everyone else is already there, and they're more than a little shocked to hear that not only had Elidibus kidnapped Y'shtola, but he's a primal. Although it now makes sense why he would be working so hard to get people to have faith in the Warrior of Light. The more worship a primal gets, the more powerful it is. While you are fighting Elidibus, the Scions dealt with all the lesser Ascians, which was far easier than it should have been. The Ascians were obviously sent as a means of giving the weak heroes the confidence they needed to get stronger. It seems like something that's been practiced, which makes Thancred wonder just how many times the Ascians have done this. The people of Kalusia seem to be just as fascinated by the Warrior of Light as the people of the Crystarium, which makes sense since they're still trying to find a purpose in this new world. Which means Elidibus has all of Norvrant hearing his message, and is likely getting ready to make his move. Sure enough, another star shower appears over Yulmore, but this one comes with an illusion of Amarat too. Some people start to get the echo, but strange beings made entirely of light start to appear, preparing to remove darkness from the world by force. And that darkness is you and the Scions. The ghostly warriors of light spawn all throughout the city, coming out of the same magical rings the Exarch used in his summonings. It's unlikely that he's summoning them, but if his magic is being used, then getting back to the Crystarium is a must. Fortunately, Chinoo's has an airship ready for you to take, so you all rush off to the ship so you can get back to the Crystarium as fast as possible, because clearly the friend of yours that Elidibus was talking about killing was the Exarch. The trip on the airship lasts for just long enough for a dragoon summoned from another world to cut you all out of the air. The ship crashes and the Warrior of Light and the Scions are forced to cross Novrand on foot, but hundreds of spectral warriors appear to block your path. Fortunately, during your time on the First, you made a lot of friends, and everyone from the miners with the Talos and the trolley to the Fae of Ilmeg and the Virtue Hunters help you cut a path through the seemingly endless stream of warriors. After fighting for a while, you all finally get a break, and Alisaie reveals that while you all were fighting, she figured out that the beings that were attacking you were heroes summoned from other shards, so they could save the world from its doom, which is you. Which means there are even more people who are fueling Elidibus' power. That means you have to stop him, quickly. Of course, it won't be that easy. Before you all can head back to the Crystarium, an army of spectral warriors appear, so the Scions cut you a path through them and you head off to the Crystarium alone. Before all of this started, the Exarch and Paglth'an had succeeded at putting the Exarch's memories into the spirit vessel, and they were all ready for the Scion souls. However, Elidibus showed up, and after having watched your fight with Emmett, he realized that he would need to summon heroes from other worlds and bring them to the First like the Exarch did if he wanted to beat you. The strength they would give him would be more than enough to deal with his greatest enemy. Of course, the Exarch has no intention of helping the Ascian, but Elidibus doesn't need him alive to draw the knowledge of how to use the tower out of him. And since he only needs to summon the souls of the warriors and not their entire bodies, he doesn't need nearly as much prep time as the Exarch had. Paglth'an attacks the Ascian, but Elidibus overpowers his familiar, causing Paglth'an to drop the crystal that held the Exarch's memories. As the Warrior of Light sprints to the Crystarium, she hears grunts of pain and turns to find the Exarch and Paglth'an. They had managed to trap Elidibus in the tower, but they had to run away after that. However, Elidibus took the vessel with the Exarch's memories and his Allegan blood, so he has the power to control the tower, which is how he's summoning so many warriors. And the non-stop use of the tower's power is doing a number on the Exarch's body. Even worse, the Ascian has twisted the people's desire to become heroes and used it to fuel his power, which is something that the Exarch cannot forgive. So he's coming with you to the tower whether you want him to or not. Paglth'an is too injured to join you, so it'll only be the two of you going to fight, but the Exarch still has a trick up his sleeve. So the two of you head to the tower, but you have to make a stop to send a rescue party out to pick up Paglth'an so the Nu Mou doesn't die in the woods alone. The one thing that the Exarch wasn't counting on when he stopped to send some guards to help Paglth'an was running into Lena. To other soldiers he could avoid explaining himself, but that'll be impossible to do with Lena, especially since she can see what's happening to him. She's scared for him because he's obviously in bad shape, yet he's heading off to battle with someone who was powerful enough to make him flee the tower. She has every right to be worried, so the Exarch takes time to tell her that the time he shared with her, from her being a small girl getting lost in the tower, to her becoming more than a capable fighter and leader, has made him as proud of her as if she were his own daughter. The fact that his speech sounds like something you'd say when you were about to go off and die does not even remotely change the way the woman feels. But Lena gets what he's trying to do, so she puts on a brave face while the two of you rush off to face Elidibus. Then she bursts into tears. As you get closer to the tower, the Exarch lets you know that with all the people Elidibus has summoned, their faith and devotion to his cause will have made him far stronger than he was when you fought him in Amarat. It's going to be a rough fight, but there's nothing to do but press forward. So the two of you race through the tower to fight the emissary. The Exarch's body starts to crystallize even further as you climb the stairs, and to make matters worse, Elidibus summons even more warriors to bar your path. So the Exarch decides to hold them off for you so you can deal with the Ascian. He wanted to fight with you, but his mission has always been to guide you down the path of saving the First, and as long as he completes it, he's happy, which sounds a lot like what Elidibus said about his own mission. The difference is the Exarch knows why he went through all the trouble to bring you to the First, and why he's so willing to let you take the lead. It's because at the end of the day, everyone has that one thing that they're truly good at, and yours is being a hero. That's not his strong suit, so he's perfectly fine letting you take the lead. But the time for talking ends when Elidibus summons even more warriors, so you rush on ahead, but the Exarch promises you that he's not about to die here. He still has something to show you. At the top of the tower, you find Elidibus standing beneath his artificial star shower. He finally remembers that he first met you at the Waking Sands a long time ago, when he thought you would be a good tool to help him bring the world closer to the rejoining. Turns out he should have killed you back then. If he had, he wouldn't be the last of the Unsundered. With all the other Ascians being fragments of their former selves, the only hope for salvation for his people falls on his shoulders. So now he has to kill you, resurrect Zodiark, and restore the people who sacrificed themselves to summon him. And even if that takes him generations, he will see it done. The Ascian is obsessed, and the loss of his friends and memories is taking a toll on him. He bounces back and forth between emotions, and his inability to remember why he fights is a major problem. The why is what gives heroes the strength to keep fighting. It's over, but the Ascian can't accept it, so he summons more and more warriors of light and merges with them, taking on the form of the very first hero, the original warrior of light, and he attacks you. However, drawing on the gift you received from Hydaelyn and claiming your convocation seat, the seat of Azem, you summon allies to fight by your side. Elidibus recognizes the spell used as one from his time, and he wonders who you are, but it doesn't matter. You have to die, and so begins the greatest fight in Shadowbringers. Elidibus does everything he can to kill you, and when all of that fails, he traps you in the rift between worlds where the Ascians will go to recover. Again, you draw on the powers of Azem and summon a friend to help you, one that Elidibus knows well. He reverse Thanos snaps you back into the Crystal Tower and leaves with a wave that you should recognize because Emmett Selk did it every time he left while he was traveling with you. So Elidibus summons even more Warriors of Light and hits you with a level 3 limit break. Now if you want to know something funny, it wasn't until I made this video that I noticed the message that comes on the screen telling you to use your limit break to survive. Do you know how many times we died here on day 1 before we did the tank LB as a last resort? That's why reading is fundamental. After a lot of pain and suffering, you defeat Elidibus, but he's immortal and he still won't quit. However, he didn't realize what the Exarch learned about the Crystal Tower despite having the vessel with his memory stored in it. The tower was made to store nearly limitless energy, so the Exarch uses the technique he'd been saving, and with a little help from you, he uses the tower like a big piece of white auracite and absorbs the Ascian, removing his star shower from the sky and revealing the true form of Elidibus, a small child. As he dies, the Warrior of Light gives him the crystals with the Convocation's memories, all but Azem's, and they remind him of what had happened, how he had become Zodiark to save the people, but they were still unhappy, and they ended up divided, which had happened before, but never in such a serious way. So Elidibus had separated himself from Zodiark to help his friends. With his memories restored, the final bit of him is absorbed into the Crystal Tower, leaving behind only the spirit vessel with the Exarch's memories inside. The fight is over, the calamity is stopped, Norvran is saved, and the Scions have a way to get home, but the Exarch overused his power and his body is turning into a crystal. Before the transformation is complete, he wants to ask you a favor. He wants you to promise that you'll take him on your next adventure because you can take his soul and his mind to the source and give them to his past self, something that you of course agree to do. So, striking his all too familiar pose, he pours the last of his memories into the spirit vessel and fully crystallizes. The Scions run in just in time to see the Exarch's final moments. Now all that's left is to get ready to go back home, after you let the Scions know everything that happened. Learning more about the Ascians and the Uniter must have really done something to Y'shtola, because she seems genuinely happy that you started to understand Elidibus at the end. The fact that an ancient brought you back from the rift boggles Alphinaud's mind, but that was easy for Y'shtola to figure out. Emmett had made a contingency plan just in case you had killed him, and that plan was simply meant to put Elidibus out of his misery so the Ascian wouldn't be forced to suffer alone for eternity, focusing only on his duty and never able to even remember his friends. While the Scions are all talking outside of the tower, Paglth'an walks up even though the guards tried to make the Nu Mou stay in bed. With this new arrival, you're forced to tell the story of the Exarch's end again. Paglth'an is sad, but one look at the Exarch's spirit vessel shows that both his mind and soul are still intact and ready for you to take to the source. Hopefully his soul will successfully merge with his past self. While all this talk is more pleasant than being stabbed, the Scions are still dying and they need to get back home. Still, they all plan on heading off to say their goodbyes to the friends they've made on the first. You and Alisaie go to check on Howrick, who is steadily getting better, although he keeps visiting Teslene's grave. You of course have to visit the Chais in Yulmore, and as you probably expected, Dulia is crying over the fact that she'll likely never see Alphinaud again. But the fact that you can still travel back and forth between worlds to keep them updated makes things a little bit better. Urianger is out in the Feylands, and when you go to him, he tells you to go see Seto for one last time. And since the Amuro can see souls, he gets to talk to Ardbert one last time. It makes him happy to know that his friend still lives on in you and will get to go on more adventures. Since you're making the rounds, you have to head to Slitherbough, and you arrive just in time to see Runar present Y'shtola with a flower and beg her to stay. For the first time, Y'shtola actually seems speechless. Now, if anyone remembers how brutally she shot down Magni in Stormblood, this is like night and day, which, considering the fact that Magni's tribe is born of the sun and Runar is of the Knights Blessed, I guess that comparison is more accurate than you think. She has to leave, but since there's proof that travel between worlds exists, she promises that she'll find a way to do it so she can come visit, which makes Runar pick her up and spin her around again. You have one last stop in Nabatha Rang, which causes you to run into Magnus and the other miners who babble on and on about the trolley until Thancred and Reen get back. They let Magnus know that Thancred's leaving for good. The man's first thought is something that everyone seems to have forgotten about: Reen. She can't leave the first with you, but she claims she'll be fine since she has a place in the Crystarium and has made some friends like Gaia so she won't be alone. If you want to know about Gaia, you have to check out my coverage of the Eden story on this channel. Thancred doesn't want to leave her, but the whole dying thing kind of removes the choice. Plus, he has responsibilities that he can't neglect, not if he wants to set a good example for his surrogate daughter. So it's back to the Crystarium you all go for the final time. Despite the brave face she's putting on, Reen is really going to miss you all, and watching you all leave is going to be rough. Even so, she comes to thank you all for what you've done for her world. There's more to do, but she'll use the happy memory she has of your time together to give her the strength so she can do justice to the names that Thancred gave her. Thancred knows that she will do fine because she's already made him proud. Of course, she's not the only one who came to see you all off. The entire Crystarium shows up to thank you and send you on your way. Lena also wants you to let the Exarch know when he wakes on your world that they'll be fine without him. He doesn't have to worry about them. With all of the well-wishing out of the way, the time has finally come to put the Scions' souls in the spirit vessels and head back home. Beck-Luke hands out the vessels, and the Scions, with the help of Alisay's Porksy, vanish into the vessels. There's no way to know for sure if this is going to work, but you put them in your pocket and step through the portal to the source. You bring them back to the Rising Stones where Tataru and Kral are waiting, and after placing each vessel next to the Scions' still bodies, their souls return home. Now, it would have been hilarious if they woke up in the wrong bodies, especially the twins, but they didn't. It turned out fine, and Tataru is overjoyed to see that they're back, although none of them will be doing much for a while since their bodies feel like a pack of Lalafell were jumping on them while they were unconscious. But there's still one last thing to try, so you race off to the Crystal Tower to hopefully wake up your friend. A few days later, the Scions are relaxing in Mordona, all healed up, but Alisay is feeling a bit down, mainly because Tataru, with a little help from Feo'u and the leaders of the Alliance, has recreated the clothes Thancred, Y'shtola, and Urianger had on the first, along with their weapons. Seeing them really makes her feel like she hasn't had any real development, but Alphinaud thinks the time for their growth will come. Kral and the Warrior of Light show up to join the others, and Kral is so exhausted because she had to work with your new friend to restore the barriers in the Crystal Tower. But even if someone does get in, G'raha will know since the transfer worked, and he woke up with all the knowledge he had gained in his other life as the Exarch. And G'raha finally gets his wish. He gets to join the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. It doesn't take long for someone to come screaming for help, giving the Scions their first mission, something Alisay is eager to jump right into. Meanwhile, Xenos has taken over the palace in Garlemald, and his Ascian friend is coming along nicely with his plans. Of course, Xenos doesn't really care what the Ascian is doing, and the fact that he took over the body of Yotsuyu's dead brother doesn't mean much to Xenos either, since he doesn't even remember the man. Fandaniel, this sundered and clearly insane Ascian, has been working on some things, but he's surprised that Elidibus hasn't shown up to order him around, which makes him think that the man is finally dead. With no Unsunder to order him around, he's free to do what he wants, and what Xenos tells him, of course. And since you've made it back to the source, he wants Fandaniel to prepare his hunting ground, because it's time to pick up where the two of you left off, with a battle to the death that will change the very landscape of the world. Now that the Scions have gotten used to being in their bodies again, Alphinaud thinks it's time for them to get back to work, solving the world's problems, one fetch quest at a time. With the chaos in Garlemald, a lot of rumors have been coming out of the nation, so Thancred wants to sneak across the border to see what's really going on out there. Urianger thinks that's a good idea since you all need to know just how big of a threat you can expect from the fractured empire, and you need to know if Xenos is the one pulling the strings. Since he thinks it's such a good idea, Urianger decides to go with Thancred, and since he needs someone to make his ammo for him, he can't really object to the company. Alizé's already figured out what she wants to work on, but before she can explain, Lys swings by for a visit, and G'raha Tia proves that he wasn't just a fanboy over you. Apparently his knowledge of all the Scions is extensive, which Lys thinks is a little weird since she's never actually met him. But she has heard about him, and since he was so important in your mission to save the First, she counts him as a friend, despite the fact that he did nearly kill you all in the process. The fact that the little endeavor dealt a serious blow to the Ascians does give him some bonus points, but finding out that Hydaelyn and Zodiark are primals is a lot for her to take in. While Zodiark will never be able to regain his full power now that the threat of calamities and rejoinings are over, he's still a threat that the Scions will have to watch out for. Of course, Lys didn't come by just to talk about primals or to check on her friends. She has a message from the Alliance about the Empire. When Varys was killed, his cousin Nerva tried to take the throne, but he wasn't the only one who wanted it, so a civil war broke out. The fighting has destroyed a whole lot of the capital of Garlemald itself, and its territories aren't doing any better. The Alliance is going to meet up in Alamigo to decide what's the best way they can capitalize on the situation, and they want the Scions there. Since Thancred was already planning a trip to the Empire, he's more than willing to get more information from the Alliance if it can make his trip easier. Alizé decides to opt out of the meeting because she wants to work on curing tempering, and the Warrior of Light would much rather do that than sit in a meeting. And G'raha very enthusiastically volunteers to come with you. From the minute Alizé had started working on curing Halric, she had been thinking about Gabu, and since she learned that people who were corrupted by the light were able to be fixed, she figures it'll work on tempering too. But she wants to learn a little more before she just rushes off to Limsa, because if she's wrong, she could kill her little kobold friend. The problem is there aren't very many places where she could learn anything about tempering, since the research hasn't really been moving forward over the years. At least the research of the modern scholars hadn't moved forward. From what G'raha knows, the Allagans did quite a bit of research on that particular subject, and if any of their research is still around, it'll be in the Etherochemical Research Facility out in Azizla, which makes sense since that's where the Allagans experimented on primals and their worshippers. Alizé's never been there, but she knows that you'll need an airship, which is something that Tataru has the perfect solution for. It's called the Bonanza, and it's the Scions of the Seven Dawn's very own airship that she had built with some help from some friends at the Rising Stones. Tataru wanted to pilot it herself because she's cheap, but her training went about as well as her attempts to become an Arcanist, which is to say they went extremely bad, so she hired a member of the Garland Ironworks to do the job for her. So you get to fly to Azizla in style. While G'raha's never been to the place, he knows his way around because of all the records in the Crystal Tower, which means he knows exactly where you all need to go. With a quick Google search, G'raha finds a report on iconic corruption, only to find that someone deleted it, but the author's name, a guy called Owen, probably kept a copy of his work somewhere else. There's a place nearby called the Habisphere where the researchers who worked in Azizla lived, so it's likely the man kept some backup files in his house, which means more flying around Azizla. G'raha goes to pull up the information from one of the floating nodes, but the thing says that an evacuation order is currently in effect, so no one is allowed in the Habisphere. That order likely came during the Fourth Umbral Calamity, so it will likely never end on its own. In typical Alizé fashion, she just wants to break down doors and force her way into the Habisphere, but G'raha has a more subtle way that is less likely to damage the stuff you're looking for. If you can send an energy surge through the control system for the area, it should reboot the system and cause the doors to open on their own. That of course requires a sufficient energy source, but lightning shards form in areas of stagnant ether around the continent, so scooping up a few of those should be enough to do the job. The fact that such a mundane bit of information was in some of the reports G'raha read in the tower shows just how thorough the Allagans were, but it also means you have to do a fetch quest. And since Alizé's there, she wants to turn it into a race to see which one of you can find a shard first. Because G'raha Tia has a love for the old days, instead of hunting his own shard, he follows you just so he can reenact the scene from your first meeting during the adventure of the Crystal Tower. Alizé actually fails to find a shard at all, and she's not happy about it, but at least you have what you need. G'raha's plan works, but the reboot doesn't do anything about the defenses of the Habisphere. Fortunately, G'raha's royal blood should let him explore the area without getting attacked, so he heads off alone while you and Alizé sit, wait, and talk. This Owen guy's report makes Alizé think about the thesis papers that she had to write back in Sharlayan. Of course, hers was on the different ways to apply ether in combat. Alphinaud obviously wrote something more on the political side, talking about his nation's duty to the rest of the world. He claimed that Sharlayan's knowledge should be used to protect all life on the planet, which is not something that went over too well in a non-interventionist land like Sharlayan. His dad, being one of the nation's political leaders, was a little bit upset about the whole thing. Alphinaud didn't care, and he was more than willing to argue with anyone who objected. G'raha finally makes it back mid-conversation, and it's no surprise that his thesis was about the Allagan civilization. Unlike the twins, he wasn't a student of the Studium, but he did have to write a thesis to earn his Archon marks. His trip to Owen's chamber bore fruit, and he found the man's archive node, which contains the information you seek. But of course, things won't be that easy. Even though the node recognizes G'raha as a member of the royal family, the information you need requires a password, and you don't know it. Alicey actually tries to use the word password as password, and the computer says that she's so stupid she's no longer allowed to talk in the presence of royalty, which makes her want to kill the thing, something that really wouldn't help the situation. Instead, G'raha decides it'll be better to see if Cid can help solve this problem. Of course, that means you have to find him, which is a job better suited for Tataru than you, so you all head back to the Rising Stones with the Allagan node in tow. Tataru makes a few calls and Cid agrees to meet you at the Stones, which gives you time for Krau to tell you what happened at the meeting. The different Imperial legions have all started working on their own individual plans. The most dangerous seems to be the 3rd Legion under the command of Lord Nerva. They've gotten a lot of money from House Brutus, the same family that took in Yotsuyu and Asahi, which is not a good thing for anyone because both of them were crazy. They still don't know what Xenos is doing, but hopefully Thancred and Urianger will know more once they get back. For now, the Alliance leaders think it'll be a bad idea to interfere, so they want to go back to working on the primal problem. They want to work with the friendly groups among the beast tribes to try and find a way to get peace once and for all. Krau thinks they're trying to deal with all of their small conflicts before the big fight with the Empire that's definitely coming in the future, because it will probably be devastating. Whatever they're planning, it won't be easy to get the beast tribes to trust the people, especially the Lamencens. So they've recruited Alphinaud and Y'shtola to try and ease the tensions just a bit. Until the issue of tempering's been dealt with, it's not likely any real progress will be made, so Alicey's cure will be mandatory if there's going to be any hope for peace between the tribes. Which means there's nothing more to do until Cid arrives. When Cid shows up with Biggs and Wedge, they're all super excited to see G'raha again since they had expected him to sleep for a lot longer, which he technically did. And Cid technically figured out the secrets of traveling through time and space, which he's having a hard time wrapping his head around since the current him is nowhere near figuring out how to do that. But he'll figure out how to do that once he solves your current problem. Honestly, it's not all that complicated figuring out the node's password. He just has to modify some magitech so it can do the work for him, and since G'raha has a dictionary full of Allagan words, it doesn't take long for him to find out that the password is freedom. The report has information on how icons corrupt people and bind them to their will. The process is exactly like what Alicey thought. Tempering happens when the ether of someone's soul is shifted to match the element that the icon represents. Normally people's ether is perfectly balanced, as all things should be, but if they're exposed to an icon like Sephiroth, their ether would shift to the earth aspect. This would enhance the wielder's earth magic, along with giving them superhuman endurance. Exposing them more than once would cause their powers to grow, and eventually their bodies would mutate. There's more to the process than just changing the person's elemental alignment, however. Their souls either become umbrally charged or stagnant during the process. If the soul is made stagnant, the person will lose their own mind, and it'll be replaced by the will of the icon, which makes the person worship them, and makes the icon stronger. The Allagans actually managed to make material that could shield people from the icon's corrupting powers, but learning how to do that cost a lot of people their lives since each failure left them tempered, and the only cure they knew of was death. That caused Owen to try to get researchers to work on a cure for tempering, but the proposal was rejected by Amon. He didn't think healing the tempered was important, and when Owen argued, he was stripped of his rank and kicked out. He figured his report would be deleted from the archives after that, which is why he made a backup in hopes that someone would pick up where he left off and find a cure for tempering. While G'raha wants to know why Amon was against curing the tempered, Alicey is more focused on the fact that she was right, and with Angelo she can heal tempering. Well, she can fix their souls, but she can't do anything about their modified minds. You'll need to suppress the primal's hold on the tempered while fixing their ether so you can solve both problems at once. Otherwise, they won't get taken out of the primal's control no matter what you do to their ether. It sounds difficult, but it's not something G'raha hasn't done before. He used the same techniques to store the Scions' memories in the spirit vessels, so if the technique is done right, he should be able to restore the tempered's memories while Alicey fixes their ether. The process still sounds extremely complicated and bloody, since last time G'raha had to literally use his blood to make the process work. but on the first he didn't have any Allagan nodes. They can simulate magic, so if they can run through trials of the memory transfer process, it should be able to do years worth of experiments in a few days. That way it could find the right way to do the transfer without G'raha having to torture himself for each test. Technically that's the same technique you use to find the password, but to do something that complicated would need much stronger equipment, and a lot of it. So Cid sends Biggs and Wedge off to start setting up the workshop, while he sends you to get some ceruleum and ice shards to power the terminals and keep them from overheating. Since Cid gives you the money, it just takes a trip to Ishgard to get them to ship over all the ceruleum you need. On your little trip, you run into Emmerich and Lucia, who are bringing the very large Vanu chief to Ishgard to help work on dealing with the primal problem. Emmerich wouldn't mind having Estinian around when the fighting with the Empire picks back up, but he hasn't been able to catch up to the man. Since he stops by the Rising Stones more than he does Ishgard, Emmerich wants you to tell his friend to at least stop by and say hi every once in a while. Hearing that you're working on a cure for tempering gets him excited because everyone has lost someone to one primal or another, so he makes sure that you have everything that you need, and a lot of it. Cid's more than happy with what you all brought him, and during the time you were away, he and G'raha have set up the terminal with the help of Nero, who may as well admit that he likes working with Cid, which is why he let Jesse hire him. Hearing that him and Cid worked together to learn time travel played a part in him staying too. After the prep work, Cid turns on the machine and it becomes a waiting game, which means you finally get to take a nap, one that ends when the machine starts to overload. Instead of shutting it down like they should have, they leave it running, and as expected, it explodes. But G'raha sees the spell he needs right before the screen goes black. It still needs to be tested, but he thinks he found the spell he needs to cure tempering. Which is good, because after that explosion, that machine will never run again. Alisaie's been waiting for this for a long time, and since she has the cure, she rushes off to Limsa Lominsa to test it on Gabu. Unexpectedly, Alphinaud and Y'shtola are in the city. They were supposed to be having a meeting with pirates about the primal threat, but some of the major groups didn't show up to the meeting, so it was cancelled. Which means that they get to witness your attempt to cure tempering. G'raha will deal with the memory part by putting the spell into Angelo like he did with the spirit vessels, which will keep him from having to cast the spell every time they want to try it. The process will still take a lot of ether, and since G'raha can't use the Crystal Tower's energy anymore, he'll need some of yours, which means it's good that Alphinaud and Y'shtola showed up. After G'raha has done his part, Alisaie takes Gabu off to begin the treatment because it will take a bit of time. When she comes back, she's barely able to stand, but it worked. Gabu is back to normal, which means Alisaie has officially cured tempering. Now she wants to cure everyone that's been tempered, but the amount of ether it took to heal someone who was barely tempered nearly killed her, so to cure more severe cases would take far more ether than you all could gather. Plus the treatment won't work on people who are so far gone that their bodies have started to mutate. You will need a lot to be able to make the cure widespread, starting with a whole lot more Porxies, and if you want help making familiars, there's no one better than Matoya, the real one. So it's time to pay a visit to Y'shtola's master, who will not be happy that she hasn't visited her since she came back from the first. Matoya would have probably been happier to see Y'shtola if she hadn't shown up with a raid party without telling her. JFYI, it's rude to show up at people's houses without calling first. It's even more rude to show up with friends. Y'shtola does lighten the mood by thanking the old woman for keeping her and her friends alive while their souls were on the first. That smile fades away pretty fast when Alphinaud lets slip that Y'shtola was using Matoya's name on the first. I'm pretty sure Alphinaud let that slip on purpose just to see the look of absolute horror on Y'shtola's face. The fact that she was running around using Matoya's name, then only decided to visit when she needed a favor, doesn't do much for the old woman's mood, and she didn't even need Y'shtola to say she wanted help with something to know that was the reason she came by, because she knows her student very well. Y'shtola tries to use a bit of flattery to ease the mood, but that doesn't work. Instead, Matoya wants to know if G'raha was going to introduce himself or just stand there and keep staring like an idiot. Once he says his name, she remembered that one of her old colleagues used to talk about him and his obsession with all things Allagan. And Kryle told her all about how G'raha was the one that snatched the Scion's soul to the first, but she wants him to stop beating himself up over that. He's young, and young people always mess things up, so he should just go ahead and get over it. And she wants you all to get to the point so you can get out of her house. Alisaie summons Angelo and tells Matoya everything. Making the familiar won't be all that difficult, but with the amount of Porxies you all need, you'd pass out before you got to 10 of them. But there's a way to make a Porxie that can create other Porxies, but to do that will require you to take a trip to her old workshop. Since the place hasn't been used in years, there's bound to be some feral familiars and monsters running around that will definitely try to kill you, which means you can clear the place out for Matoya as payment for wasting her time. She sends one of her frogs to guide you through the place, and she was not wrong about there being all kinds of stuff in there that wants to eat you. Now this entire dungeon, from the music to the scenery, reminds me of a very old game called Banjo-Kazooie on the Nintendo 64. Now I still have my original N64 and the controller, and all of it still works after over 20 years. Yet I've had to buy 4 Xbox 360s, 2 PS3s, and 2 PS4s in half that time. So the graphics may have improved, but the quality of the game systems definitely haven't. Now following Matoya's talking frog, you and the Scions manage to get everything turned back on and you make a giant porksy. Now what Matoya apparently forgot to tell you is that you would have to tame it by beating it senseless while it tries to murder you. After you show it who's boss, G'raha goes about infusing the thing with magic after taking so much ether from the twins that they nearly black out. He doesn't do much better once he infuses the giant porksy, so someone else has to give the thing the ether it needs to make other porksies. Other than the Warrior of Light, the only person left standing is Y'shtola. And if she was really worthy of calling herself Matoya, she shouldn't have any problem charging up the porksy on her own. Y'shtola of course takes the bait and nearly passes out, but she does give the mother porksy enough ether to make 3 little Angelos. The process is still difficult, but it's a lot better to get 3 porksies instead of 1 for the same amount of ether. They could have let the Warrior of Light pump ether into the thing to get more, but for the cure to be something that means something, it needs to be able to be done by regular people. Otherwise, the Warrior of Light wouldn't have time to do anything else but cure tempering, and that would take away from her ability to do fetch quests, so you know we can't have that. If the porksies are sent out to the major nations, being able to offer healing for tempering as part of the negotiations with the beast tribes will be a good way to move the conversation forward. And Alphinaud thinks Limsa Lominsa should be one of the first ones to get it. Y'shtola agrees, but she doesn't think she can walk out of the room, let alone back to Limsa, so someone else has to do it. Seeing how hard it was to actually make familiars, Y'shtola is starting to understand just how powerful Matoya was in her prime. Since the Scions don't have any more favors to ask for, and Matoya has better things to do with her time than deal with children, she's going home. Y'shtola goes with her despite the woman's claims that she doesn't want to be bothered, so you and the others make the trip to Limsa, where Merlwyb is in the middle of talking to an ambassador from the Sahagin and the Kobolds. Hearing about the cure for tempering is exciting news for the Admiral, but she doesn't think that'll fix the issues between the men and the beast tribes because the summoning of primals is something that they do because they have issues with the nations of man. Until they can deal with their very troubled past, the beast tribes and the humans will never be able to get along. Merlwyb was the one that told the nations to try to make peace with the tribes, because ever since her ancestors had come to the shores of La Noscea 700 years ago, they had been fighting the beast tribes who lived there. The only group they had ever worked with had been the Kobolds, and that ended badly. And now the fights with the Sahagin have gotten worse since the calamity has caused them to have to find new spawning grounds. All of the groups were fighting for survival, so they thought peace would be impossible, but seeing the Scions do the impossible over and over again, that word doesn't hold as much weight now. So she had decided to try for an alliance, but as soon as she did, her own people turned on her. The Admiral's goal was to get an audience with the leader of the Kobolds by using one of the groups they were on better terms with, but the bloody executioners didn't agree with that. And them not showing up to the meeting sent a message to the other pirate crews. Since they are the largest of the 3 crews, if they fight against the peace, then it won't happen. Their leader is Captain Hilfer, but he's been bedridden, so his right-hand man Sicard has been leading things. The man has a complete and total disdain for authority and refuses to speak with Merlwyb. She told the Yellow Jackets and the Rogues to figure out his plan, but they haven't found anything out, so the Scions volunteer to do it. You all split up to get information on Sicard, but there's not many people who know much about him other than the fact that the bloody executioner started making way more money after he took over. But nobody knows how. Especially since there haven't been any Garlean ships to rob, and they are the only ones that the government allows pirates to loot. Some of the pirates, like the Krakens, changed their tactics and started trading with the East, but the bloody executioners aren't that tactful, so Sicard's definitely not doing that. Whatever they're doing, they're spending a lot of money in the taverns, but they're keeping their secrets. Even the reporters from the Harbor Herald haven't been able to figure out where they've gotten their money from. They're working really hard to keep the source of their profits secret, and Alphinaud thinks he knows why. While he was asking questions in Harker's Alley, he learned that when the executioners started making more money, the price of crystals started to drop. There was less demand for them, so Alphinaud checked with Hoary Boulder, a scion he had watching the beast tribes, and he learned that even though the tensions between the tribes and the Laminsans haven't diminished, Titan nor Leviathan haven't been seen in a while. That likely means neither the Sahagin nor the Kobolds have enough crystals to summon the primals, so it's very likely that the executioners are stealing crystals from the tribes and selling them. Alphinaud doesn't have proof to bring to the Admiral yet, but he's working on it. He heard from a very upset merchant that someone was selling crystals cheap and causing a lot of problems for the other businesses by undercutting their prices. So Alphinaud set up a meeting so he can pretend to be a buyer so he can find out if this mysterious wholesaler is the pirate you seek. The meeting is set for a place nearby, so you all head off to the meeting spot. There's a Lalafell waiting at the meeting point, which is no surprise because they're always involved in something illegal. But G'raha makes a point that none of you can argue with. If this Lalafell is working with the pirates, he probably won't want to deal with people who are known friends of the Admiral. Since he's new to the group, and likely unknown, he thinks it'll be better if he goes and talks. It makes sense, but I think G'raha just wanted to get involved in the subterfuge. And he is really bad at it. Lucky for him, the merchant is greedy enough to overlook his horrible acting and takes G'raha to their storehouse, where of course, you follow him. Since what they're doing isn't exactly illegal, the merchant has no problem hinting at the fact that their massive storehouse full of crystals came from Ogamoro. You hear everything, but Sakard comes in and catches you all sneaking around since the spot you chose to hide in was terrible, and he knows exactly who you all are. He just doesn't know why you're there. Alphinaud was trying to find out why they were fighting against the Peace with the Beast tribes, but since they're making their money by robbing the Kobolds, obviously Peace would cut into their profits because stealing from allies is not a way to keep people happy. Sakard doesn't even bother arguing. He also reminds you that nothing they're doing breaks the code. Robbing beastmen is fair game. They're only keeping it secret so other pirates won't jump in on their hustle. He thinks it's kind of ironic and hypocritical that you went into Ogamoro and killed Titan, but you seem to have an issue with them stealing crystals, which keeps Titan from getting summoned and makes them a profit on the side. If what he's doing is so on the up and up, he should have no problem explaining that to the Admiral. Since Sakard can't argue with what G'raha said, he invites the Admiral to meet him on their ship. Merlewib is happy that you found out what the executioners were up to and managed to set up a meeting, so she wants you to join her so the Scions can see what's about to happen next, since it'll change a whole lot of things. A whole lot of the pirates are on the ship waiting for you all, and Sakard has one demand that Merlewib stops trying to make peace with the beast tribes. Limsa is a nation of pirates, and he wants it to stay that way. But the days of piracy are over in Limsa if Merlewib has anything to say about it. That's not something the executioners wanted to hear. But piracy isn't the only thing Limsa is known for. Hundreds of years ago, the Lamenson's ancestors were driven out of their homes after a failed rebellion. They sailed south and ended up in Lenosha, but since the Kobolds occupied the land, they had to turn to piracy to survive. And that's how they lived for years. But they changed when they joined the other nations to fight the Empire. They do what they need to do to survive. And if that means changing, they'll do that too. And the world has changed again. With the Empire on the verge of collapse and the territories like Werlin and Bajja moving toward their freedom, the Lamensons need to change again. Merlewib plans on having their fleet leading the world in a golden age of trade. If Limsa doesn't change, they'll miss out on real wealth, and that change needs all of Vilbrand to be united, and that includes the Kobolds and the Sahagin. Regardless of how good what Merlewib is saying sounds, Sakard is not giving up piracy, but he doesn't want to throw Limsa into a war, so he challenges Merlewib to a duel, which has to be the stupidest idea in a long list of stupid ideas. A gun is called death penalty for a reason. She shoots his first bullet out of the air, and is nice enough to shoot him in the leg, but he refuses to quit, which would have gotten him quite dead if Hilfer hadn't shot his gun out of his hand. Since he's the actual captain, he's the real decision maker, and from the minute they signed the Galatian Accord, which united all of the pirate crews under the Admiral while they were at war with the Empire, they became one crew with Merlewib at the head. She made the decision, and they're all supposed to follow it. Sakard gets that, but he doesn't know what to do if he can't be a pirate. But he seems to have forgotten what being a pirate was truly about. It wasn't about stealing, it was about freedom and the sea, and there will be plenty of both in Merlewib's new Limsa. Once he accepts that, Hilfer still thinks Sakard will make a good replacement. But either way, he promises that the executioners will follow whatever orders Merlewib gives. She had known from jump that she would have to duel Sakard, but she hadn't expected Hilfer to step in. In any case, she's happy he kept her from having to kill the boy, and he hopefully learned a lesson, one that she hopes she can teach the Kobolds. Of course, there's no hope of negotiating with any of the tribes while they're under the control of a primal, so Merlewib wants you and the Scions to heal the tempered Kobolds leader. But before you head off, she has to let you know why the Kobolds hate the Lamensons so much. 50 years ago, when the Sahagin were winning the fight against the Lamentsans, they made a pact with the Kobolds. The terms were vague, but they said that the wealth of the sea would belong to the Lamentsans, and the land would be for the Kobolds. Since the agreement was vague, the Lamentsans took over the northern part of Lenosha, which the Kobolds had claimed as their own. Naturally, wars erupted across all of Vilbrand, and it technically hasn't ended. So even if you cure the temperate leaders, it'll be hard to make the Kobolds trust the Lamentsans again, and for good reason. Her second in command doesn't think you'll even get that far since the Kobolds don't have a reason to meet with you anyway, which is true, but Merwyll plans on returning the crystals the Bloody Executioner stole so she can personally apologize. Mistbeard thinks that's a stupid idea because you'll be putting yourself in their power and bringing them enough crystals to summon Titan right then. But to summon Titan would require the Kobold High Priest to be there, and that gives you the chance to cure him. Now he won't be showing up alone, which means you'll be fighting, but killing any of the Kobolds won't help what you're trying to do, so that makes your job even harder. But Mistbeard has the Conqueror's Chain that he used to use in his pirate days to avoid killing the people he robbed. The entire plan is going to be hard to carry out, especially considering how much ether it'll take to cleanse someone who has been exposed to as much of Titan's ether as one of the Kobold High Priests have. That means Alicey will be defenseless while she casts the cure, making your job even harder, but she's willing to take the risk if it gives you a chance to save Vilbrand, so you all head out to Camp Overlook. Gabu follows you all out there because he has something he wants to say to the High Priest of the Second Order, but Alicey refuses to let him come because it's going to be extremely dangerous, and having him die after she put in all that effort to cure him would be annoying. Merwyll manages to get your audience because simply mentioning the crystals got the Kobolds excited, and they agreed to have the Patriarch Zadar meet you all in the Ugamaro mines where you last fought Titan, which means they're definitely going to try to summon the Primal when you get there. When you head into the Navel, things go exactly how you thought they would, and the Kobold leader tries to summon Titan. Mistbeard ties him up, and Alicey goes to work curing his temperament, and the fighting starts. Swarms of Kobolds attack, but you finally get to truly see Merwyll fight, and I gotta tell you, she's at least as strong as Raban. It's a good thing that she's as powerful as she is, because the Kobolds really threw everything at you all. But Merwyll and Mistbeard are willing to even block attacks with their own bodies to make sure you all win. And in the end you do, and Alicey manages to free the High Priest from Titan's control. Zadar's memories come back, and the first thing he sees are the corpses of Gabu's parents who he had sacrificed to summon Titan, and for some reason they hadn't decayed, which means either not as much time has passed as you'd think, or their bodies don't degrade as fast as humans. In any case, the full weight of what he's done hits him and he breaks down. Gabu, being a child, didn't listen when Alicey told him not to follow you all, and he runs in to tell Zadar that it was all Titan's fault. The god never helps them, he only steals their minds or their lives, but as the leader, he can put an end to the primal summoning for good. Merwyll wants the same thing, and she tells Zadar of how she wants to put aside the past and work together. While Zadar admits that hurting his people for Titan was wrong, he doesn't think he should join forces with the Lamentsans, not after they proved they couldn't be trusted. It was them breaking their word that forced the Kobolds to summon the Primal in the first place. Still, Merwyll tries to remind him of the days where Kobolds shared their smelting knowledge with the Lamentsans, which is the reason the nation has grown to what it is. I can't lie, the more she mentions everything the Kobolds had done for the Lamentsans only for them to get betrayed, makes her people seem even less trustworthy. She offers to have her people sell the Kobolds' products in all the corners of the world so the Kobolds' wealth can grow, but it's not until the Admiral hands over one of her guns and proves herself willing to trade her own life to buy the peace does Zadar agree to give the alliance with Lamentsans a second chance. The fact that Gabu trusts you all helps your case a lot too. Of course, he wants the Scions to help free the others of his people who are controlled by Titan, which is something Alicey is more than happy to do. Zadar is the leader of one group of Kobolds, so there's still a long way to go before the Lamentsans get total peace, but they made a major step in the right direction. Since that's done, it's time to head back to the Rising Stones, but a soldier runs up warning you all that something strange is happening at the floating city nearby. A strange glowing tower has appeared out of nowhere, and while you're staring at that one, Merwyll gets a call that there are more of them popping up around Eorzea, and they seem to be Garlean made, which has the Alamegans on high alert. Merwyll wants you all to head there just in case they need help, since they're the most susceptible to an attack. Lise is happy to see you, but she doesn't get to say much before an Ascian flies overhead with a very large dragon by his side. They land on the roof of the palace, so you all race to the top where Fandaniel finally introduces himself to you. He gets straight to the point. He plans on recreating the final days, and he's placed his towers all over Eorzea because they will play a key part in his plan. While the Unsundered were obsessed with restoring their original world, Fandaniel never really cared about that. It was kinda hard to take an interest in a plan when you were just another Sundered minion, and since Elidibus is dead, thanks to you, he doesn't have to work on their plans anymore. He can now fulfill his heart's desire of destroying this world in its entirety, for no other reason than he just wants you all to die. He wants to die too, but he wants to take you all with him. He makes it quite clear that you won't be able to appeal to his sense of morality or try to reason with him. There's no common ground to be found. He wants you all to die, and he wants it to hurt. And he wants you to try and stop him, because your struggles will make it all the sweeter when you fail. To give you a taste of what's to come, he has his dragon, one that he calls Lunar Bahamut, hit you with a little bit of dragon breath. While he plans on raining death and destruction down on everyone else, Xenos has something special planned for you. He doesn't care if the world is destroyed, as long as he gets to fight you again. With the warning sent, Fandaniel and Bahamut leave you all to figure out exactly what you need to do now. Lys plans on taking a group to investigate one of the towers, and while the Scions want to go, Rabban forbids it. After what Merlwyb told him you all did with the Kobolds, you need a break, because you'll all really be needed for what's to come. When you get back to the Rising Stones, you all tell Kral and the others what happened in Alamigo. While Fandaniel seems completely insane, he didn't give away any of his plans, so other than his desire to recreate the final days with the towers, you know nothing. As for his Bahamut, it looks like the original one, but the fact that it listened to the Ascian proves that it's definitely not the real Bahamut. It's likely something made from Ascian magic, which means you have no way of knowing just how dangerous it is. In other news, Y'shtola gave the Tempering Cure to the Sultana since the Immortal Flames are pretty quick when it comes to executing the Tempered, so the faster they get the cure, the better. However, the Flames had been in the process of making peace with the Amalja when all of a sudden the negotiations came to an end. Some of the Amalja were abducted, and they blamed men. The Immortal Flames didn't find out who did it, but they did come across one of the towers. Not long after, word came that towers aren't just appearing in Eorzea. There have been sightings of them in Yanxia too. Since you're dealing with a dragon, Kral thinks it might be a good idea to get help from someone skilled at fighting them. And you know what that means. More Estinian. And Tataru and Kral know how to find him, and how to convince him to help. While the rest of you rest and prepare for what's coming, the Lalafell head off to get the Dragoon. And whatever is coming is going to be something unlike anything you've seen before, because one of the scouts Lys sent to the towers comes back tempered. But he's not sworn to any god. His will is bound to Garlemald. While Kral and Tataru are off tracking down Estinian, news comes in that Thancred and Urianger are on their way back from Garlemald. With all the weird stuff that's been happening, Alisei hopes that they have some good news. When Thancred gets back, he's a little upset that you all cured Tempering while he was gone, since now he can't brag about the fact that he helped. Granted, Alphinaud admits that all the real credit goes to the Warrior of Light, Alisei and Grahatia. All he did was act as an ether battery. The fact that Thancred shows up without Urianger has the twins wondering if he managed to lose the man somewhere. Apparently Thancred had tried, but he failed. Instead, Urianger had decided to let Rabban and the others in Alamigo know what was going on in Garlemald while Thancred came to tell all of you. It's really bad out there, even worse than what Lys and the others had thought. The entire city seems void of life, all except for the Imperial Palace. Thousands of people are working there day and night to change the palace into a giant Magitech device that's meant to manipulate ether for something. And all of the people working on it move like they were possessed, or tempered. Thancred wanted to get closer, but he figured that would be a bad idea, so they decided to leave. The idea of Garleans being bound to someone's will isn't surprising since Fandaniel was able to control Bahamut. If he can do that, snatching a few people's minds would have been no big deal. The information that Thancred got on his trip is useful, but that's not all he brought. He has a message from Alamigo. Rabban is having a meeting to talk about what they found out about the towers, and they want the Scions to be there for it. Thancred wants to hear what he found out too, because the towers have really been bugging him since he first saw them, so it's off to Alamigo you all go. When you all make it to the city, you're greeted by another Scion, Alphinaud's good friend Arnvald. He had told Alphinaud the last time they talked that he was off on a mission, so running into him in the city was a bit unexpected. Apparently seeing that Alphinaud had been gone for a whole year and still didn't grow is something that Arnvald comments on, even though he knows the boy's body hadn't actually aged a year. He just wanted to call Alphinaud short in a sneaky, sophisticated way. Ellison hit their growth spurt late, but Alphinaud is positive that Arnvald will have to look up to him in the future. That's more than true because Urianger didn't reach his full height until he was 20, Of course, he was still shorter than his girlfriend Moonbreeda. The reason Arenvald is in Alamigo is because of Fordola. The two of them have some things to do before they head out on their mission, but Arenvald will talk to Alphinaud about it after the meeting. With Arenvald and Fordola working together, Alphinaud already has an idea of what their mission might be. All of the Alliance leaders are at the meeting, and the first thing they do is thank Thancred and Urianger for gathering information from Garlemald for them. It was extremely dangerous, but nothing compared to fighting an Ascian and Bahamut. Of course, Fandaniel nor the dragon had made an appearance since that day, so there's no telling what he'll do next, or when. So in the meantime, members of each city-state have been sending people out to check the towers. The scouts they sent came back tempered, but because of the Porxies they were able to be healed. After they recovered, all they remembered was getting close to the tower, hearing a loud roar, and the next thing they knew, they were being cured. But unlike other tempered, they were chanting "Glory be to Garlemald," meaning their wills were bound to a nation and not a particular entity, which changes everything that they all thought they knew about tempering. That's not the only bit of bad news. The Amojab were not the only beast tribe to be missing members. Every other tribe in Eorzea has apparently had members kidnapped, and Emmerich thinks the abductions have something to do with the towers after his scouts saw figures wearing all black leading some Ixal towards the tower in Dravania. The Temple Knights were able to free the Ixal and capture their captors, who all had Garlean equipment. It seems like Fandaniel has recruited a group of Garleans and have them operating at his command. At first the Alliance had planned on marching on Garlemald from the east and west to force them into a peace treaty, but the towers seem to be a more major threat and they need to be dealt with. With the risk of tempering being present around every tower, the only people who can safely scout them out are ones with the Echo, so Raban chose Fordola and Arenvald to take on this extremely dangerous mission. Alphinaud's not exactly comfortable with the fact that his friend is taking on a mission so dangerous. He's not a rookie when it comes to combat, but he has far less experience than any of the lead Scions. Still, there aren't many people who have access to the Echo, so he'd feel pretty pathetic if he didn't go. When it comes to Fordola, seeing what's become of Garlemald and knowing that she had been a part of them makes her feel a strong need to find out what exactly she had really been working for. Since they're both positive that they want to do this, Thancred wants to know what tower they're going to. The one in Girabani is apparently too well guarded, so they're going to go to the one in Paglth'an, which is deep in the heart of Amojad territory. Arenvald and Fordola know that area well, so they should be fine. Once it's all done, Alphinaud wants to take another trip to Loch Sel with Arenvald to show him that he's finally learned how to swim since the last time the three of you had gone exploring there. He really hasn't, and Arenvald rightly doesn't believe it either, but time is of the essence, so he and Fordola head off, and Alphinaud decides that it's time for you all to track down Lunar Bahamut. With perfect timing, Tartaru calls you on a link pearl to tell you that they found Estinian, but he ran off as soon as they mentioned Bahamut. He did say he was going to Ishgard, so you all head there even though he'll probably be gone by the time you make it. Urianger and Thancred leave that to the rest of you while they head back to the Rising Stones to tell everyone what happened. Alisaie's actually eager to meet the famous Estinian, and from what Alphinaud said about the man, she'll be disappointed if seeing him doesn't make her go all weak in the knees and faint. Of course, the man might not even be there anymore, which is why Tartaru sent over the Bonanza just in case you need to chase the Dragoon down again. Surprisingly, Estinian is still in the city, and he actually finds all of you. Then he makes the fatal mistake of mistaking Alisaie for Alphinaud. He even rubs her head and calls her rugged, which really ticks her off. Graha goes full fanboy over him, which makes him even more confused, and of course the Warrior of Light just stands there and stares. Fortunately, Alphinaud heard Alisaie shouting, and he shows up to explain the whole twin situation. Seeing the two of them interact in such a friendly way makes Alisaie think back to how Alphinaud never really got along with other boys growing up because he always wanted to be the one in charge. Seeing how he acts with Estinian and Arenvald makes her think he's changed. The Warrior of Light thinks he sees them as brothers he never had, which is a job Alisaie doesn't think anyone should want because being his sister was hard. I can't lie, I think being her brother would be harder considering the fact that she's kind of violent with a short temper. It was only pure luck that you caught Estinian in the city. He was about to borrow an airship and head to Azizla to speak to Tiamat. She was Bahamut's mate, and she's still alive and imprisoned there. Since she's the one who first summoned Bahamut as a primal, Estinian thinks she might be able to give a bit of information about this new version of her former mate. Since you all now have an airship of your own, you decide to go together. However, Alisaie warns him that if he mistakes her for Alphinaud again, she'll throw him off of the ship. Literally, while it's in flight. Other than the Warrior of Light, Estinian is the only one of you all who's actually met Tiamat. He had gone to talk to her after the Dragon Song War to find out if she wanted revenge against mortals too for what they had done to her in the past. Unlike Nidhogg, she didn't. She stopped hating you all a while ago, but she still feels guilty for resurrecting Bahamut in the first place. Estinian was actually worried about her, but it wasn't solely his own doing. Nidhogg is a part of him now, and he could tell that Nidhogg didn't want his sister to become a tool for evil. Since Nidhogg is gone, Estinian feels it's his job to look out for her. Tiamat doesn't seem to know about anything that's happened, so you let her know about Fandaniel and his Bahamut. Hearing that Bahamut has been summoned again does not make her happy, but she didn't sense the summoning at all. The only people she could think of who could have summoned Bahamut were their children in Mericidia. When Bahamut was first summoned by the Allagans, he had tempered the dragons who were used in the summoning and made them work for the Allagans. If the same thing has happened again, then the dragons of Mericidia are very likely under Fandaniel's control. Hearing that the Ascians are once again tarnishing Bahamut's memory and enslaving her children really upsets Tiamat, and Estinian uses that to his advantage. He came to Oz's Law for one reason, to get Tiamat to help fight to avenge her children and her mate. While fighting would be something Tiamat might be willing to do, she was the first one to summon Bahamut back, and she got tempered too. However, with something as powerful as she is, she was able to keep her own will, but if she fights this new Bahamut, it might be able to turn her. And the dragons of the first brood at full power are way more powerful than any of you. The only reason the Warrior of Light was able to fight Nidhogg was because Racevelgar had given her his eye. If Tiamat joins the Ascians, the world's gonna burn. The other problem is she's not strong enough to break her shackles. The tempering can be cured, and even though Alice hasn't tried it on something the size of a building before, it should still work, with enough ether. So that's one problem you can solve, and if you can free her from the Allagan prison, it'll give Tiamat the chance to put Bahamut to rest for good. When the dragon's planet was destroyed, Hydaelyn gave them a safe place to live, and Tiamat feels she owes her a debt, so she can't let your world end. If you free her, she'll fight with you. While Alice is sure she can cure Tiamat, this isn't one of those things you do without doing as much research as you can, because if they free her and she's still tempered, somebody's gonna get swallowed. Fortunately, the Allagans kept highly detailed records about everything they had captured in Oz's Law, and G'raha knows where to get that information on Tiamat. While he and Alice work on that, the rest of you have to figure out how to let her out. The control nodes are on the flagship, and since G'raha keeps a spirit vessel with his blood in it in his pocket, he gives it to you so you can operate the machines. Him, Rambros, and Urianger have been trying to find a way to transfer different bloodline traits to people through the vessels, so he started carrying one with him at all times so he can run tests when he has a few minutes. The three of you head to the flagship, and having G'raha's spirit vessel makes the nodes be more than willing to talk to you, so finding the node that controls the dragon restraints isn't all that difficult. Using G'raha's vessel, it lets you activate it. However, it can't release Tiamat without a system update, because it can't access the controls with its outdated software. Fortunately, the control panel it needs isn't far away, and it's annoyingly happy to show you where it is. Since this thing is clearly running on some type of Apple software, the update is estimated to be done in about 5 years, but Alphino thinks he can figure out a way to make it happen faster, but he'll need time and that spirit vessel. Since you and Estinian will be pretty much useless here, you can go and do whatever you want, and Alphino will call you when he figures it out. Before you do anything, Estinian wants to know something. The Ascians were behind the war with the dragons and the Allagans, the dragons and the Ishgardians, and pretty much every other problem you've had. But you've tried to find common ground with them more than once. He wants to know what you're going to do when you find Fandaniel. Fandaniel's no himself, and you do not plan on reasoning with him, which is good because Estinian thinks that kindness you try to always show people is going to come back and bite you one day. He doesn't think you're wrong for operating the way you do, but sometimes people just need to die, and if you try to make friends with them, you could have wasted time that gets one of your friends killed. He's right, but that doesn't mean you're going to change. Since you can't help Alphino, you all head back to Alice to tell her what's going on. She and G'raha have found out that Tiamat's tempered state is similar to that of the Kobolds, so the treatment should work, but the amount of ether and treatments it'll take to fix is going to be a problem. The fact that Tiamat shows a milder case of tempering than the others will help a little bit. It's only because she saw Bahamut as an equal and not a god that she escaped being controlled. The talking has gone on for long enough, so you tell Alphino to turn off the ether dampeners around the dragon and Alice gets to work. Tiamat immediately starts to feel better, but as the tempering fades, memories of the battle she had with Alec come back. G'raha thinks getting her to focus on her memories will help speed up the process, so since the dragon trusts you, he wants you to make her talk about her past to help stir up some memories. Since you're always eager to learn more, you ask her about the Ascians and Bahamut. The Allagans had their own stuff, but they decided to take Mericidia, which was the dragon's home. Way back when Bahamut and Tiamat first headed off to find a place of their own, they came across the very fertile land of Mericidia, even though it wasn't called that until later. When they first got there, they were welcomed by the people of the forest. It was a nice place, and the dragons decided to raise their kids there. When the children of men got there, at first they made it a point to not step on the dragon-controlled land, and the dragons left them alone too. But as more and more people came and started claiming more and more land, eventually they started to fight over it. The fighting seemed to go on forever until one day people came to the dragons to get them to keep the peace. Bahamut agreed to do it, and with him watching over the people of Mericidia, the land became peaceful again. That lasted until the Allagans killed Bahamut, and Tiamat listened to the Ascians and summoned him back as a primal, which led to all the death and destruction that you know all too well. The whole time the dragon was talking, Alisei was trying to cure her, and she's pretty much out of ether. Estinian decides to get to a spot where he can get a good first hit on Tiamat if Alisei fails, which doesn't make her all that happy since she thinks that means he expects her to fail. I think he's just being practical. Since you're trying to cure a godlike being, Alisei actually gets ether from you this time, and with what she gets from you and G'raha, the cure actually works. After feeling the hold of Bahamut actually leave her, Tiamat asks a question that you all should have expected. She wants to know if you can fix Bahamut the same way. But there's no way to cure the tempered who are that far gone, so he'll stay under the Ascian's control until you put him down. And sadly, that's likely the case for her children too. She's going to call out to them once you free her, and if they don't come, she'll put them out of their misery. Estinian gives Alphino a call, and he turns off the Allagan prison, freeing Tiamat and giving you all a super powerful ally who, unlike Racevelger, has no problem killing stuff. The timing couldn't be better, because Urianger calls G'raha to let him know that Bahamut's been sieging over Paglth'an, and he's leading a whole army of dragons. Not waiting for any of you, Estinian hops on Tiamat's back and flies off to Paglth'an while you all head to Ulda to meet up with the others. You all would have gone straight there with Estinian, but Alisei needed at least a little bit of rest, otherwise she would have just charged in, passed out, and died. By the time you reach Ulda, Thancred tells you that Paglth'an is already under siege. The Immortal Flames have already headed out to back the Ammoja up, which is kind of surprising to Alphino since the peace talks had fallen through. But Nanamo has said they were friends, and peace treaty or not, she wasn't going to leave them to die. Even the entire syndicate voted to help, but they were probably thinking about all the stuff they could steal from the Ammoja during the fighting or something else. The other Alliance nations sent soldiers to the area too, but they still won't be much of a match for the dragons. Oddly enough, even though people are fighting near Bahamut, no one's been tempered by him. Primals never missed a chance to take new servants to boost their power, which means he most likely can't. Primals never serve anyone, so something had to be different about the summoning of Bahamut to make him work for the Ascians in the first place, and whatever that was must have removed his ability to temper people. That means that the people don't have to have the Echo to fight Bahamut. Anyone can. Granted, that doesn't mean that they can't get eaten, so the Scions still need to get out there as soon as possible. They're all very eager to rush off and fight, especially since Fordola and Arnval were scouting in the area and are definitely caught up in the fighting. So it's off to Paglth'an, one of the biggest settlements for the Ammoja. When you get there, Tiamat and Estinian are already putting in some work blowing up tempered Imperials, dragons, and Magitech alike. Remember, Estinian is running around with Nidhogg as part of him, so you basically have two of the first brood out and about wrecking things. With the Scions cutting a path through the area from one angle, and the Dragoon and Dragon going from another, you all draw out Bahamut. Tiamat and Estinian attack him, knocking him out of the air, but Tiamat takes a critical hit in the process, so you and your allies have to finish off the injured dragon. Hurt or not, the dragon is still trying to murder you, but the damage Estinian and Tiamat did to him makes it a fight you can actually win. With Bahamut defeated, Tiamat vows that from this day forward, the dragons of Mericidia will never again be enslaved by the Ascians, and she's going home to make sure of that. The fact that you all came and fought and died beside the Ammoja works wonders for the peace talks. Seeing what you've done, the chief agrees to call you all allies in the war with the Garleans, and he plans on making sure all of his people know it. That's some good news that you have to share with the Sultana. However, Alphino is a little worried because he didn't see Arnvald or Fordola, which means they're already inside of the tower. They are, and what they see is horrifying. Hundreds of Ammoja are hooked up to the tower, and when Arnval goes to free them from the machine, it turns on, drawing something out of their bodies. Not knowing what it is, the two of them go to run out of the tower, but a corrupted version of Ifrit drops down and attacks them. Back in Ulda, the Scions are waiting around for news, and when it comes, it's bad. Arnval was hurt. Bad. And he's being treated right now. Alphino rushes off to check on him, and because Alice knows her brother won't take this well, she tells you and Estinian to go with him. He's frantic, but there's nothing to do but wait. Fordola's been waiting the whole time too, and when the surgeons come out, they don't even let you all see him, which means his wounds are very bad. Alphino starts to blame himself, and Fordola snaps at him for stupidly thinking he can save everyone. People die, especially those who fight, and if you're going to blame yourself for every death or injury, you need to stay away from fighting, period. Alphino knows that, but he still thinks all life is precious, something that Fordola points out will end up getting everyone killed. She sounds a lot like Estinian, something that the Dragoon points out. There are enough people like the two of them, and they aren't the ones who end up changing the world, so they need people like Alphino, the people who become heroes. Granted, most of them end up dead, and Fordola thinks you'll all be next. There's not much more to be done there, so the Scions all head to a meeting with the Sultana because she wants to talk to you all. She promises that Arnval will get the best care, so you don't have to worry about that, but you need to know what the two of them discovered. They needed to hear about the lunar Ifrit. With that bit of knowledge, it's pretty clear that the towers were made to use captured beastmen to summon primals. That still doesn't tell them how they use their captured victims to summon primals against their will. It could be just being next to the towers bends the people to the will of Garlemald, and they summon the primals to help their new master. After seeing one up close, Thancred realizes that the towers look similar to the big building that he saw in Garlemald. If that tower can temper people to them, that would explain why Fandaniel was able to get so many Imperials on his side so quickly. That's bad, but there are worse things to worry about. Ifrit wasn't the only primal summoned. They don't seem to be as powerful as Bahamut, so the Grand Companies are headed out to deal with them. They would ask the Scions to do it, but they'd all rather save your strength for later since you just dealt with Bahamut. The Amoja chief did keep his word, and they have agreed to support the alliance. Nanamo hopes the treaty with them will help cause the other tribes to join as well, but only time will tell. With the talks done, Nanamo heads off to meet with the Syndicate, and the Scions head back to the Rising Stones to prepare for what's next, and Kral wants Estinian to come with you, which he agrees to do just to keep the woman from chasing him again. Since you know that Fandaniel and his minions are planning on destroying the planet, Kral thinks it's time to ask Sharlayan for aid. They have some useful knowledge, but they're not really likely to help. But Kral doesn't think they will deny your request for help during the final days, so she's already taken the steps to go as an emissary for the Alliance. That's not the only thing she wants to go there to study. After what she heard about your adventure on the First, Kral started to wonder what Hydaelyn's blessing really was, and they started to wonder when was the last time you spoke directly to Hydaelyn. It has been a long time, which is strange since she should have contacted you when you fought the literal heart of Zodiark. Throughout history, Hydaelyn would intervene, but she hasn't done it in a while, not to you or to anyone else with a gift. On the First, Thancred talked to the Oracle of Light, but that had been Minfilia, not Hydaelyn, and Minfilia was doing her own thing, so that technically doesn't count. That means something might be blocking her voice from all of her followers, but there's no way to tell. If there's any hope of finding out, it'll be from Sharlayan. Kral wants to go, but that'll leave the Scions one man short, and seeing how hard Alphino has taken Arnval's injuries, she asks Estinian to officially join the Scions. The hopeful look on Alphino's face makes him finally accept and officially become a member of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Even though there hasn't been any news from Kral, Tataru has heard some things that are, well, bad. Lunar primals have been appearing all over the place, but the Alliance as well as some of the lower ranking Scions have been taking care of them. On the plus side, the talks with the Beast Tribes have been going much better than expected, mainly because of the things you did to help form an alliance with the Amoja and Oda. Because of that, Gridani has managed to start negotiations with the XIV. Now that's all well and good, but with no signs of Fandaniel, you still need to be on your guard. A messenger from Alamigo shows up to tell the Scions about a meeting that's being held to discuss some things that have been happening and to figure out what can be done to fight Fandaniel and his allies now that the Beast Tribes are ready to talk. The Alliance is trying to bring them all in at once, which is smart considering how dangerous things are now. The tribes all agreed to show up, so if the Scions are there, then all of Eorzea will be represented. It's a very big moment, one that Alphino wouldn't ever let you all miss, but you can't all go simply because there are other things that need to be done. Estinian doesn't want to go because he doesn't feel like being bombarded with questions by Emmerich, and Urianger wants to prep the defenses in case of an attack, so the rest of you head out to Alamigo. Seeing all of the Alliance leaders and the representatives from all the Beast Tribes in the same room without fighting is something that has never been seen before. Some are eager to rush off to free their captured brethren, but without some form of protection from tempering, just charging the towers without a plan would be death. especially considering all of the guards that are around each tower. Guards or not, with everyone together, they are masters of everything from strategy to magic, so as a united front, the battle doesn't look nearly as hopeless. Hearing that they're counted among this group of Eorzea's finest makes each of the different tribes feel truly welcome, and knowing that you can all cure tempering makes them more than willing to work together. Something that Thancred points out Minfilia would have been really happy to see. Alphinaud of course points out the obvious. Even those who can resist tempering and make it into the towers have to face primals. Fighting them is dangerous for everyone, so he wants to find a way to stop them from being summoned, period. It takes both prayer and ether to summon a primal. If you can block either one, the summoning can't happen. Which means you all have to find out where the towers are drawing their ether from and cut off their supply. It's a good idea, but Fandanyo and his people won't just let you do that, so of course you'll have to stay alert. The only way to really have an advantage is if all of the nations coordinate their movements so they can back each other up with reinforcements quickly when the time comes. All of the tribes agree, and the Grand Company of Eorzea is born. Something Alphinaud has dreamed of for a very long time, so seeing it happen actually brings tears to his eyes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Men do cry. We do have emotions. We just know that not every situation calls for them. And emotional or not, Alphinaud knows that there's more to do, so he wants to talk to the Scions outside. He's happy about everyone working together, but he's worried about the battle that's coming and how many people in this newly formed coalition are going to die. He's still having a hard time accepting that death is a cost of battle, but he doesn't get a chance to talk more about it because Connie Senna comes to ask him about the Sylphs. The Sylphs of the Ash Crown Consortium have built up relationships and trade all around Eorzea. She wants to use them to help build communication between all of their new allies to help speed up their response time when the fighting starts. But moving cargo and dealing with transporting military personnel and such is different, so the Sylphs will need to be able to consult someone who's familiar with that sort of thing. And while it did go badly, Alphinaud had started the Crystal Braves, who were technically meant to be a mobile armed force that could provide aid between nations. The Crystal Braves were meant to be the lead-in to founding the Grand Company of Eorzea, but it didn't turn out like that because Alphinaud was younger and far more inexperienced. That failure showed him what he needed to know to make it work this time, so he accepts the job. Before he writes up his new plan, he wants to talk to some of the former Braves to hear where they thought he went wrong, and he wouldn't mind your help since you were there when the group started and ended. Alice wants to help too, and Ishtola pawns Graha off on us while she and Thancred head back to tell the others what they missed. For the most part, Alphinaud had already documented the entire history of the Crystal Braves, so he could see what he did that caused it to fail. But he only had his own viewpoint to go off of, so he figures he could get a more complete report if he talks to some of the other Braves to see what they have to say. Riol and Allianz have some interesting things to add, but they aren't what Alphinaud expected to hear. After the issue with the Braves, they decided to join the Scions, partially to make up for their own failures, but also because Alphinaud took full responsibility for the group's failure, proving that he understood what it meant to be a leader. And he trusted the two of them without a moment's hesitation, despite what had happened. He had the right ideals, but a group can't thrive on ideals alone, not when everyone has their own personal goals that can take priority. It's why the Scions are a successful group. Everyone has their own individual skills and dreams, but they're all using them for a common goal. Kinda like the Straw Hat crew from One Piece. That's what Alphinaud needed to hear, so he sends you and the others to the Sylph village while he gets the report ready. But once the Sylphs don't make you dance before they actually talk to you. Since some of their own people have been abducted too, they'll be more than happy to carry messages for the new Grand Company. Alphinaud comes running up, telling Alice that she has to come quick because the Twin Adder came telling him that a Sharlayan was coming to Gridania, and Connie Senna wants the two of them there because this Sharlayan is Fortunal Leveillé, their father. To send someone of his rank, Sharlayan must be taking this situation seriously, but Alice can't understand why they would pick him to come when they had 98 other choices. He doesn't ever really discuss his work with them, and every time they sent letters home, their mom will respond. Trying to guess what their father is planning is pretty much a waste of time, so you all race back to Gridania. Connie Senna hadn't expected the Sharlayan Forum to respond to their request for help by sending a member of the Forum itself, but the twins' dad does show up, and he's happy to see his children. Their mother, Ameliance, will be happy to hear that they're taking care of themselves, and he also thanks Connie Senna for how well she treated Louis Soir while he was there. But he definitely earned their hospitality by teaching them how to deal with primals, among other things. He's a hero, although Fortunal didn't agree with him getting involved, and he still stands by the Sharlayan motto of charting the course of history, not changing it, so Sharlayan will not get involved in Eorzea's fight with Garlemald. It seems like a strange stance to take during the final days, but the Forum doesn't see this as anything more than another fight with the Garleans. If the final days were truly here, then they would know. The twins try to convince their father that Fandaniel has no intention of leaving Sharlayan alone once Eorzea falls, but the fact that they would argue with their elders is proof that him letting them leave Sharlayan was a mistake. He thought traveling the world would teach them some discipline, but all it has done is made them as foolish as the rest of Eorzea, thinking that the only solution to a problem is to go to war. The intelligent are supposed to find better solutions, and the fact that his own children are putting everything Sharlayan has worked to accomplish in jeopardy is something he can't tolerate. So he banishes them from House Leveillé. From this moment on, they can do whatever they want, and he won't interfere since they are no longer a part of his family. With that, he leaves. Alice tries to chase after him, but Alphinaud tells her not to waste their time, because once their father makes up his mind, it's not easy to change it. And even if they could have changed his mind, the 98 other Forum members would have to be convinced too. And that was not gonna happen, which means you'll all be facing this threat without them. But G'raha raises an interesting question. If Sharlayan knew they wouldn't help, why bother sending someone to meet with them at all? Because everyone in this world has perfect timing, Kryle calls to see if the twins' father has already made it. When she learns that he has, she realizes that she's wasted her time. She had tried to talk to the Forum members, but they not only wouldn't agree to help, they wouldn't even talk about it. The whole thing was strange, like they were hiding something. It's almost like they have some first-hand knowledge of what's going on. Portionnaud did say that they would know if the final days were actually happening, and he said that in a way that he meant he believed it. The Sharlayans know something, and Kryle has a feeling that they're more worried about what's going to come than they claim. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so secretive. Not only did she fail on that front, she hasn't been able to learn anything about Hydaelyn either. It's like the Sharlayans have been ordered not to help you with anything at all. She's not going to give up, of course. You all just have to change tactics, and for that, she wants you all to come to Sharlayan, after you've gotten everything set up in Eorzea. She won't be able to get you all in fast anyway, so she wants you to not die while she gets your trip set up. There's a lot to do, and the first thing is letting everyone know what the Forum said, but a sylph comes flying in, screaming that Zelphatar was attacked by a large force, but they were only passing through. They were on their way to Kurthus. A call comes in saying a large group is headed toward the Cardinal Flats, and Amalric has already sent forces out, but he's asking for support, which means the Grand Company of Eorzea has its first mission, and that mission is in Cardinal. It's going to be more dangerous than you might have thought, because Fandaniel is leading the charge. Connie Senna immediately goes to get you all an airship ready, but before you can leave, Fordola shows up and demands you come and see what she has to show you. She brought Arnvald. He's alive, but he's paralyzed from the waist down. So the day for him to have to look up to Alphinaud came earlier and in a way different way than they expected. But he didn't come to ruin the mood. He had always wanted to fight for a cause he believed in, but those days are over now, so he wants Alphinaud to do it for him, to be the hero that he can't. Alphinaud doesn't think he's a hero at all, but real heroes never do. Other people decide who's a hero, and Alphinaud has earned that title time and time again, and he'll keep doing it even though he doesn't think he's the right person for the job. Arnvald knows that he is, because he remembers how Alphinaud used to be, and he can see how far he's come. Hearing those words from his friend is motivation enough, so you all head off to battle. Arnvald puts on a brave face, but he feels useless. However, it's Fordola who corrects him and lets him know that if he stopped feeling sorry for himself, there's plenty of ways that he can make a difference too, and she'll be there to help him if he needs her. Thancred and the others have already left the Rising Stones, and the Amoja and Kobolds are on the way to Cardinal, which means you all need to join them. When you all meet up, Alphinaud lets them know that Sharlayan won't be helping them, which means the Scions will do what they always do and take down the enemies that everyone else can't, which is good because the armies arrived. Alice will cure the Tempered once you knock them out, but you have no idea why Fandaniel chose to fight in Cardinal, so there's no telling what he's about to do. The Ascian is nowhere to be seen, but his soldiers are all over the place. The Lunar Primals are out on the battlefield, but predicting what they're gonna do hasn't been easy since they aren't attacking, even when the opportunity arises. But they're still the most dangerous things on the battlefield, and the Scions, of course, will deal with them. But getting to them won't be easy since the Garleans swarm you. The Scions decide to split up to hunt down the Primals. Thancred, Y'shtola, and Urianger head east, while Alice and G'raha focus on curing the Tempered. That leaves the west to Estinian, Alphinaud, and the Warrior of Light. This is the moment where you get to see firsthand how powerful the Scions really are, and Alice is what a red mage would be if they focused solely on blowing stuff up. Her and G'raha make short work of the Magitech and get to curing the Tempered while Fandaniel hovers overhead and watches, before he summons a strange glyph that rightfully makes the Scions nervous. From far away, Y'shtola couldn't see the ether currents of Cardinal, but now that she's there, she can see that the area is a very large merging point for ether, and if the glyphs Fandaniel summoned are destroyed by the lunar primals, they could cause an ether explosion that could disrupt the ether flow of the entire planet, sparking a calamity like no other, which means they need to be protected at all costs. That won't be easy, because to destroy one of them, Fandaniel sent Lunar Odin. Thancred wanted to see how he stacked up in a fight with Odin anyway, and you get to control Urianger as the most fun healer in the game, the Astrologian. A very overpowered Astrologian. While they fight Odin, Fandaniel sent Ravana to destroy the glyph that G'raha and Alisei are guarding, and I have to be honest, G'raha Tia is what the Warrior of Light would be if they let you pick a handful of jobs and just merge them together. He's a tank that did a fusion dance with a black mage and a white mage, yet he claimed to only be powerful when he was linked to the Crystal Tower. This fight alone proves that to be a lie. While they deal with Ravana, you, Estinian, and Alphino deal with the primal that crippled Arnvald, Lunar Ifrit. And I have to tell you, he tries to cripple all of you too. Now how Ifrit became the most powerful of these lunar primals, not counting Bahamut, I'll never understand. I would have thought Odin would have held that spot, but I'd be wrong. With the primals dealt with, Fandaniel actually starts to understand why Xenos thinks so highly of you, but all you've done is delay the inevitable, something he makes clear before he teleports away. The battle was fierce, and there were losses on both sides. Alisei managed to heal some of the Tempered, but others didn't make it. The losses hit the Scions hard, but even though all the captured beastmen couldn't be saved, the tribes are happy that they were able to help some of their people. Even though there were losses, this was a victory, and it should be celebrated. The Grand Company of Eorzea had its first major test, and it is proven to be able to hold its own, even without the Scions, so Emmerich wants you all to focus on dealing with the towers while they fight the Garleans. Which makes sense, since you're all the best qualified to deal with primals. Alphino wanted to study them anyway, but if you do manage to deal with the towers, Xenos will be coming after you. And that's not the only problem. There's still the matter of Sharlayan and whatever secrets they're hiding that you all have to deal with. So that'll be your next destination. But I think Xenos is going to be a bigger problem. Right now he's out in Garlemald sporting his new scythe when Fandaniel shows up to admit that he failed to redirect the ether they need from Cardinal, so they'll have to get it from other sources, from something they call the Dreamer, and then they'll be able to open the gateway to the gods. In the meantime, Xenos plans on drinking souls in preparation for your final battle, meaning he's about to use his scythe to kill a whole lot of stuff. Meanwhile, Y'shtola decided to check on something, and she realized that the ethereal currents in Mordona have been disturbed. The same is true for Hydaelyn, and practically everywhere else. They've all gotten weaker in a way that can't be natural. The closer you get to the towers, the more disrupted the ether becomes, which means the towers are drawing ether from the land and using it to summon primals. You all go to tell your allies what you found, but for the first time in a long time, the Warrior of Light hears Hydaelyn's voice, and a figure appears, claiming that darkness is coming, and it's bringing an end to everything, and the only person who can stop it is you. This concludes the story of Shadowbringers. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share this video with your friends. And if you want to buy me a coffee for my work, sign up to become a member of the channel. Until next time, guys. Later.